Good afternoon. We shall start the afternoon session. I give the floor to Dr. Jocelyn Trinidad.
Yes, ma'am.
Our speakers.
So good afternoon to our dear participants and our resource speakers. So we're now going to begin our afternoon session for the third day of doing ethnography seminar workshop sponsored by the Office of the Vice President for Research and Extension in partnership with Pang-Aghamtao Incorporated or UGAT, Anthropological Association of the Philippines. So just this morning, we listened to the discussion about Module 5 regarding visual methods in ethnography, wherein Sir Daniel Yo and Sir Romeo Toring shared their experiences and knowledge regarding the conduct of visual methods in ethnography. So for this afternoon, we shall now listen to our resource persons. For our first resource speaker for this afternoon, we have Ma'am Zona H.S. Ampere, who is also the UGAT Treasurer. Zona is full professor at the Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History of the University of San Carlos in Cebu. Her research interests are aligned with the anthropology of development, specifically on impacts of globalization on local knowledge and practices in agricultural, coastal, slum, ethnic, and small island communities. Then our next speaker is Ma'am Marjury E. Dino, who is also the Secretary of UGAT. Marge is a faculty member of the Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History, and a research associate of the Center for Social Research and Education at the University of San Carlos. Her research interests include anthropology of development, globalization, peasant studies, community development, and indigenous knowledge. So friends, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our resource speakers for this afternoon to discuss on key informant interview, participant observation, rapid ethnographic assessment.
Hello, good morning. I know, good afternoon, sorry.
Afternoon po.
To our colleagues at the Camarines Norte State College, we would like to thank Dr. Joe for inviting us this afternoon. So as introduced earlier, we will be presenting about how to conduct participant observation as well as key informant interviews. And then we will briefly talk about rapid ethnographic assessment using as an application of the methods that we'll be discussing for this afternoon. So my colleague and I, Marjury, Dino, Marge, are you here?
Yes, Ding.
Marjury, yeah, and myself, we take turns in facilitating the discussions as well as the exercises for this afternoon. To begin with, my question. Marge, we have the link.
For the I don't have the link yet, Ma'am Ding, for the Mentimeter, the first question. I think you have the link.
The earlier I'll just
Yes.
yeah, sorry. In the chat box and please click on the link and then you type in whatever you type in. Okay, so there's the link for everyone. Can you see it now?
Yes po. You can see it po.
Okay, please click on the link and then do whatever is, put in whatever you would like to type. And then we will show that later. Okay, so far only 4 have um, in their expectations for this session. Can we have the others?
Yeah, I think Ma'am Ding got disconnected. I think she'll be using another connection for her to get back with her activity. So I hope you were able to click on the link found on the chat box. All right. Ma'am Ding, okay na Ma'am Ding? I think you got disconnected. Ma'am, you're in mute, Ma'am Ding.
I sometimes have a problem with the internet connection. It's very intermittent. So I Miss Marge will just help me in facilitating because sometimes I get disconnected.
Yeah, the same problem here po sa Camarines Norte. We understand.
Disconnected earlier. Sorry about that. Yeah. Nasa bundok yung bahay ko. Unstable daw yung internet connection. Ganun. So hopefully Marge will also facilitate. Okay, so far we have in conducting the participant interview. So, and then generally, interview, rapid ethnographic assessment, and then how to conduct. Wait. Wala yung share screen. Nawala pala yung share screen. Andito na. So how many na ba? 8 na yung So, may specific dito how to code interviewers, respondents, answers. How to code parang later
I think Zona got disconnected again. So basically what you're seeing on your screen right now are the expectations from these sessions. Nawala rin yung screen share. So sige lang, hintayin natin sa dali si Ma'am Ding.
Sure, you can probably proceed with your input and then go back na lang dun sa result ng Mentimeter later on.
Sige, oo.
Kasi
So we actually have another activity to start our discussion regarding participant observation, and I'm going to share to you. I'm going to share to you the link sa chat box at saka ng question. So you need to write down at least one observation regarding the place where you are currently located. Okay, and then we will be using Google Jamboard. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I'm going to just give you the link. See, so that's the link to the Jamboard. So when you click the link, ito yung makita nyo sa screen nyo, yung Jamboard, just need to click this icon, the sticky note, and that's where you're going to type in your observation regarding the place where you're currently located. Just type in anything, your observation regarding the place that you're currently located. And then that's it. So we're going to wait for your response, and Ma'am Ding will help me process the answer that you typed in the Jamboard.
Ma'am, wala pa pong link.
Nandiyan na yung link sa ano. Ay, sorry na. Hindi ko pala sense ever. Okay. Sorry. Let me just share the link again. Ito yung link. There. Okay, thank you. Just need to click the sticky note icon on the left side of the screen. All right, I can see one entry now. I just click the sticky note icon sa left side ng screen nyo, yung sa ilalim ng arrow. Right? Ayan. So meron na tayong apat na okay. Meron pa bang sasagot? Meron pa. All right, Ma'am Ding? Ma'am Zona?
Mukhang wala pa sa line si Zona.
Siya kasi mag-process ng activity. Sandali.
Marge.
Ay, Ma'am Ding.
Oo.
Okay.
Hindi na unstable.
Dino, okay na. Okay na yung ano mo. Okay na yung connection mo ngayon.
Nag cable, ano yun? Ethernet cable.
Okay.
Linagyan ko ng hindi na siya wifi.
Okay, mas maganda, mas stable ang connection pag ganyan, Ma'am Ding. Okay, Ma'am Ding, so meron na sila mga sagot na sa screen na. So, you have access to the Jamboard.
Wait. Okay. Sige.
I'm going to stop sharing, Ma'am Ding, so you can share your screen.
Okay. The question for this, Marge, is what?
Is
Right.
they need to write down at least one observation regarding the place where they are currently located.
Okay, sige. Dili na, hindi na ba putol-putol ang signal?
Hindi na.
Ay, okay. So,
Hindi na, Ma'am Ding.
yung dinagyan ko ng cable, nag-ano pa ako. Kinuha ko pa yung cable dun sa kabila. Sige. Okay, sorry. Okay, sige. So these are observations. Okay. We will just move them around. So it's just like in the classroom, wherein we can ask people to write, and then we can move around whatever they have written during our discussion and synthesis of whatever we are asking them to do. Okay. Saan siya? Oh, sige. I'll just put this here. Okay, so based on what we have seen from the responses of our colleagues in this training, cool and quiet. Okay. Parang may isa na naiba, no? So parang we will just highlight this one. We will highlight this one and right here that this is, ilagay siya mo suwat, March. Okay. So you were asked to observe, to write at least one observation of where you are currently located. So this observation says that the person sees people near the seashore. So meron siya nakita mga tao katabi ng baybaying dagat. Okay. So yun, observation. What about itong holy, running for due dates, quiet and hot, cool and quiet, calm and quiet, well lighted, weather not good, busy, people running for due dates, busy. So this part, it's talking more about the people, while this part is talking about ito, parang yung mga tao ang dinidescribe or ang basis ng observation. Pero dito, it's more on the environment, including this one. Okay. However, we can see that on this part, we just put a demarcation line. On this part, maybe these are a bit of what we call as evaluation or judgment. Parang, how do you know na holy? Diba? So if we talk about observation, it's more on the use of the five senses, like what do you see, what do you hear, what do you smell, what do you what can you touch, and not so much on the use of sweeping adjectives. So as it is, more of the words that are being used now for this exercise are more of evaluation and judgment. So if we talk about hot, how hot is it? Or if it's cool, what may be cool for you or what may be quiet for one person may not be quiet for another. Or it might not be cool, might not be hot because we have different perceptions. So parang ganun. So tapos yung busy, parang very subjective din yung busy. Kasi what may be for you, you're busy, but for others, they see you as you're not busy or things like that. And then for the weather, it's not good. So it's also relative. Like a farmer will say that the weather is good if it rains. But for people in the city, they say it's not good if it rains because magbabaha siguro. So parang subjective din siya. So we are looking for observations na objective, no? So that is what we'll be working on in this session also. So I will turn you over now to Marge to talk about observation. So the point of the exercise is just to see if we already have enough skills to make observation and not generalizations or evaluations. So we can work on that actually. Kasi ano naman, we are learners and we are here to talk about how to do this observation. So si Marge yung mag-proceed in talking about participant observation as a qualitative method in doing ethnography. Okay, Marge?
All right, thank you, Ma'am Ding. So let me just share my screen. Okay, thank you once again for your participation. Let me share my screen now. Right, so I will be discussing about participant observation, and Ma'am Ding later will discuss about key informant interview. Right, so based sa survey na sinagot nyo prior to this training, we learned that some of you were already able to conduct participant observation. So na-mention na yung participant observation as part of your data gathering technique, but majority ay hindi pa nakakagawa nito. So ang iba ay familiar na sa participant observation, while ang karamihan ay hindi pa. So please feel free to ask questions. You can maximize the raise hand option sa virtual sa Zoom if you want to share your experience in doing your research and how you're able to maximize participant observation as part of your data gathering technique, okay? So mas maganda kung mas magiging interactive tayo sa discussion natin yan kasi alam natin sobrang mainit kahit dito ngayon kung saan ako nakaupo ang workstation ko sobrang mainit at usually hindi na ako nagtatrabaho ng ganitong oras pag sa normal na working hours kasi sobrang init ang panahon. So ganun din sa inyo, di ba, pag mainit medyo inaantok tayo. So para hindi tayo antokin sa discussion, feel free to share your experiences in doing qualitative, even quantitative research. And yung mga insights, realizations nyo during sa discussion natin. Alright, so what is participant observation? So participant observation involves getting close to people and making them feel comfortable enough with your presence so that you can observe and record information about their lives. So basically, from the word itself, participant observation. So you actually have your active participation sa community or sa area kung saan ka nagkakandak ng research. So, paano ba ito ginagawa? Ano ba yung ginagawa pag sasabi yung participant observation? So, titignan natin kung ano ba ang participant observation muna at later, i-discuss natin kung paano ginagawa ang participant observation. Basically, from the definition, diba? Bibigyan mo ng parang mas magiging kapalagayang loob mo ang mga tao sa community in such a way na hindi maging obtrusive yung presence mo sa community, na mag-iiba na yung ano nila, mag-iiba na yung behavior nila pag nandun ka. So hindi rin siya yung tipo na parang journalist ka, nagpuntahan yung mga tao na isa-isahin mo silang tatanungin about sa research mo. So titingnan natin ano ba yung gagawin, paano ba ginagawa yung magiging komportable yung mga tao sa community habang ginagawa mo yung pag-aaral mo. Okay? So it involves establishing rapport in a new community. So building rapport with people in the community. So it's learning to act so that people go about their business as usual when you show up. So ibig sabihin, pag nandun ka sa community at hindi nababago yung kanilang behavior, ibig sabihin, ano na sila sa'yo? Kampante na sila sa'yo, di ba? So yun ang goal ng researcher, ng ethnographer, at sa paggamit ng participant observation. But hindi yun automatic. Hindi yun automatic na pagpunta mo doon parang okay na, tanggap ka na nila, di ba? Kahit di ba pag pumupunta ka sa bahay ng kabarkada mo, first time mo pumunta, hindi ganun kakomportable yung mga kapamilya mo, mga kaibigan, ibang kaibigan ng kaibigan mo. But yun. It's also removing yourself every day from cultural immersion so you can intellectualize what you've learned. So, ang participant observation is i-immerse mo yung sarili mo sa community. At the same time, alam mo kung kailan mo ipaprocess yung nakita mo, yung na-observe mo sa community, yung experience mo sa community. So, it is actually how participant observation works. Okay. So, the use of participant observation and in applied anthropology. So, this is an example of how participant observation is useful in resolving social problem, or even in marketing purposes, or in this example that I included in this presentation. I'm going just to read this part. Participant observation has long been used in product application research, where the object is to solve a human problem. One area of applied anthropology that's getting a lot of attention is product development. Example. Panasonic thought it had a winning idea in 1995 for an electric razor that women could use in the shower. But none of the women they observed using the shavers during home visits took it into the shower. And that's an example of participant observation. So they did home visit and they noticed that the women do not actually take their razor to the shower. So yun ang purpose niya. Bakit hindi na dinadala? Supposedly dadalhin yung shower, di ba? So the women who were in bathing suits all said that they didn't believe a razor could be waterproof, and they were afraid of dropping the razor in the shower and cracking the porcelain. The shiny, smooth material used in making the razor was interpreted in Japan as an indicator of quality. So sa Japan, it was the material itself was, parang alam nila na quality. But in the US, the American women, it's actually an indicator of fragility. And thus, the Panasonic Lady Shaver was rebuilt for the American market with the new kind of rubbery material that looked and was non-slip and waterproof. So dahil sa ginawa nilang pag-visit sa mga bahay, kung saan yung mga target market nila, nakita nila, nalaman nila na may problem sa design ng material na ginamit. That's an example of how participant observation can be actually useful in product development. Okay. So you have the roles of the researcher in doing participant observation. So you have the participant part and of course the observer part. So, and the participant part implies an immersive experience in a real world, field-based setting. As such, it implies that the researcher is holistically committing his or her feelings, thoughts, emotions, etc. to that setting. So it's immersive experience. So, pag sa ganito, depende sa research na ginagawa mo. So for example, you're conducting research in the indigenous community. Of course, the participant part is actually going to the community, you doing like immersion in the community. You stay in the community for several days or months or probably a week, and then babalik ulit sa alis ka ulit and babalik ka naman. So it's in a way, in the process of going back and forth to the community, you actually immerse yourself in the experience of the people in the community, their culture, their ways of living. And at the same time, mas nagiging kampante ang mga tao sa community sa presence mo. Okay? as a participant part. And of course, you also have the observer part. It's characterized by the scientific approach to knowledge that implies objective, scientific, neutral, scholarly recording of this data or observations. So, kahit pa anong gawin natin, of course, hindi ka pwedeng maging talagang parang if you're studying the indigenous community, hindi ka naman talagang maging parang kahit ilang buwan ka, hindi mo masabing ikaw ay ganito ka, you're already like a member of that IP. So in a way, in the process of going back and forth to the community or staying in the community, you still have that observer part. You're actually recording everything that you're observing in the community. But of course, the process of observation, as sinabi kanina ni Ma'am Ding in the first part of our very first activity is that you're going to objectively describe what you've experienced, what you saw, and all the aspects in that community, in that culture that are relevant to your research or to your research topic. So in participant observation, it actually involves an array of data collection methods. Of course, you have observations, natural conversations, informal interviews, and unobtrusive methods. So of course, I think it has already been, this array of data collection methods have already been mentioned or discussed by previous facilitators, even during the first day and the second day, and even by Maria Manghas, and even by Jessie and Dr. Banyas and Dr. Zayas in their presentations. So hindi natin masyadong kasi parang of course natural conversation, that is example of hanging out and also building rapport with the people, and informal interviews. You don't really need to, like, for example, like you don't need to show your notebook and your pen and while interacting with people. You can just interact with people and ask questions related to your research in a way, and it's actually an unobtrusive methods. Again, that's very important. When you're doing participant observation, it should be unobtrusive. Hindi na-affect ang behavior ng mga tao sa community. Kasi kung naapektuhan ang behavior, yun ang record mo, ang behavior na ibang na behavior nila dahil sa presence mo, then of course, hindi na ganun ka-objective yung magiging result ng study mo. Okay. So, this is actually a very important thing in doing participant observation, hanging out and gaining rapport. Right? Diba, participant observation is actually pinaka-basic, pinaka-importante na part ng paggawa ng ethnographic research. So, and hanging out and building rapport is one way for you to, is a very important aspect in doing participant observation. So, hanging out builds trust or rapport, and trust results in ordinary conversation and ordinary behavior in your presence. So, once you know from hanging out exactly what you want to know more about, and once people trust you not to betray their confidence, you'll be surprised at the direct questions you can ask. So mas nagiging, ano ba tawag doon? Mas nagiging open ang mga tao sa community. Pag naka-establish ka na ng rapport sa kanila. Of course, it will start by hanging out. So parang simple lang, parang di ba, kung paano mo ginagain yung paano ka di ba, for example, kahit sa pakikipagkaibigan, hindi ganun kabilis na may mga tao na mabilis makipag-friend sa iba. May iba na hindi masyadong madaling mag-open up sa ibang tao. So, sa pamagitan ng hanging out, yun mas makuha yung nila, yung trust sa kanila. Ito, mapagkakatiwalaan to. Ito, okay pala to siya, hindi pala siya. Mas naiintindihan mo yung paano mo sila i-approach, ano yung tamang approach na gagawin mo sa kanila, paano mo sila tatanungin, anong questions ang dapat mong itanong sa kanila na hindi sila ma-offend. So, yun ang pagkakaiba. Kasi for example, sa experience namin as researchers, pag may mga research kami na pure survey, quantitative, napupunta kami sa mga area, may dala kaming questionnaire. So, wala masyadong building rapport na nangyayari minsan. So, iba yung reaction ng mga respondents pag ganun. Especially kung ang survey na ginagawa mo ay about for example, socioeconomic survey, and then ang project is about development sa area na may na may posibilidad na pwede silang ilipat sa ibang lugar. So iba yung pagtanggap sa iyo ng mga pag-respondent sa ganun. Iba rin na may experience namin sa mga research na mayroon talagang participant observation na before kami gumawa ng survey na parang may hanging out na nangyari, nakilala na kami ng mga respondents. So, pag nagtatanong na kami, mas mabilis silang magsumagot at saka hindi sila nagdadalawang isip na sumagot sa mga tanong namin. So, iba-iba yung experience pag mayroong trust na na-develop in the process of doing research. Kumpara sa pumunta ka lang doon at saka bibigay ka agad ng survey o mag-research o mag-survey ka agad. Now, without, establishing your presence or immersing yourself in the community at first. So in hanging out or in participant observation, one has to learn when to question and when to questions and when not to questions as well as what questions to ask. So malalaman mo kung kailan ka magtatanong, anong hindi mo dapat tanungin at kung ano ang dapat na tamang tanong. So I remember from the discussion of Pang-Aghamtao, and that sometimes questions is actually more important than answers. So may mga instances na gano'n, na importante na alam mo kung paano ka, actually hindi lang instances kailangan importante talaga na alam mo kung paano ka anong tanong ang dapat mong itanong, what questions to ask in doing research. And with hanging out, you can actually revise, in participant observation, you can revise the questions that you actually prepared before going to the community. Doon mo ma-realize na, hindi pala sakto yung mga tanong ko. Ay, dapat, ganito dapat ang tatanong ko. Kasi nalaman ko sa ganito na ito pala dapat na termino na gamitin sa questionnaires ko. Yun. Right. So, objectivity. So, may mga questions. Ito yung mga palaging tinatanong ng iba. How are you going to be objective in doing participant observation? How scientific is your methods? Diba? So, according to Russell Bernard in his book, we can, however, become aware of our experiences, our opinions, our values. We can hold our field observations up to cold light and ask whether we've seen what we wanted to see or what is really out there. Kasi kung ang meaning ng objectivity mo, o pagiging objective mo ay para kang robot na wala kang mag-feel, hindi ka makakagawa ng sarili mong idea, hindi ganon. Hindi ganon ang research. Of course, it could not be absolutely value-free. You as a researcher, choosing your research topic, meron ka ng biases. Alam mo yung kung interest mo, di ba? Kaya yun ang pinili mong research So, the goal is not for us as humans to become objective machines. It is for us to achieve objective, that is accurate knowledge by transcending our biases. No fair pointing out that this is impossible. It is impossible to do completely, but it's not impossible to do at all. So you're going to transcend your biases. Hindi mauuna yung mga biases mo. Of course, when you go to the community, may expectations ka, di ba? May expectations ka. But once you immerse yourselves in the community through participant observation, you will realize that hindi lahat ng mga nalalaman mo about the community or anong knowledge mo, even your judgment, are right. At in the process, nababago mo yung perception mo. So in the process, you're actually learning as a researcher from the people in the community. So during field work, you reach inside, according to Turnbull, and give up the old, narrow, limited self, discovering the new self that is right and proper in the new context. So you're actually replacing you're trying to educate yourself, and that the old, narrow, limited self is becoming like the new self that is right and proper in the new context. We use the field experience, according to Turnbull, to know ourselves more deeply by conscious subjectivity. In this way, he concluded, the ultimate goal of objectivity is much more likely to be reached, and understanding of other cultures that is actually much more profound. I know we are actually familiar, diba, with the term cultural relativism, in contrast to ethnocentric ideas. So when you go to the community, we all know that we have our biases, we have our, meron tayong mas, balis tayo sa ating comfort zone. But of course, when you go there, hindi mo, hindi siya parang nagpe-prevail, hindi mo siya pinahayaang lumabas yung mga biases mo. Iniintindi mo kung ano yung sitwasyon at kung ano ang kalagayan ng mga tao sa lugar. Like if you're going to go to a urban poor community, of course alam mo na sa urban poor community iba yung sitwasyon kung saan ka ng community nanggaling, halimbawa. But hindi mo pinapakita na yung usual na behavior or kung ganoon man ang behavior mo sa community, like ano ba, yung mga reaction na hindi na ma-offend, hindi ka makapakita ng mga reaction na pwedeng ma-offend ang mga tao na sa community na pinuntahan mo. And in the process of learning, the culture, the behavior, the various practices of people in the community, you're actually placing your old ideas. And again, it's a process of educating yourself. It's actually the beauty of participant observation. You're not just learning, but you're for your paper, but even at least 5 reasons for insisting on participant observation in the conduct of scientific research about cultural groups. Okay, 1 is that participant observations open things up and make it possible to collect all kinds of data. So mas madali na ang pag-gather ng data because of participant observation. So mas malalaman mo kasi kung paano ang pamamaraan sa komunidad at alam mo kung paano ka papasok. Kanina, di ba describe niya paano ka papasok, paano ka makipaghalubilo sa mga tao, paano mo sila i-approach, paano ka magtatanong, anong mga tamang tanong sa kanila, diba? And participant observations help you ask sensible questions in the native language. So it's as much as possible, mas maganda if you're going to formulate the questions using the native language para mas madaling makakuha ng sagot sa kanila. Minsan kasi, di ba, kung ano yung mag-iba kasi hindi na tinatranslate yung questions into the local language. Mas maganda talaga na pag you're actually doing research, you're going to translate it in the native language. So now we experience, for example, like for example in formulating research questions. So in one of our research sa corn farming sa Cebu in the 8 municipality. So before we conducted the survey, it's actually a qualitative kanang research. So both quanti-quali. Before we conducted the survey, we identified first local enumerators. So the local enumerators are usually like either the farmers themselves or the children of the farmers. So kasi 8 municipalities. So for each municipality, we identified enumerators. And then sa process, we actually we nakipagkita kami sa kanila, nag-identify kami, and then nakipagkita kami sa kanila, and then meron kaming training. Parang it's actually already a process of participant observation as well because they're actually from the community and they're children of the farmers or the farmers themselves. We only have, I remember, si Ma'am Zona ang project leader namin. I remember we only have like 5 pages na questionnaire, short bond paper na questionnaire. And sa training, it's from I remember English pa yon. But we're already planning to translate the questionnaire to Cebuano. Sa process ng training, yung lumabas na, parang hindi ito, before ka magtanong ng ganito, dapat itong itanong mo. Kasi ito yung process ng ng corn farming. Before mo gawin to, ito muna ang gagawin mo. Tapos, sila mismo nagsabi sa amin, itong gagawin mo. Tapos, hindi itong term na gagamitin mo, dapat ito ang gamitin mo. And then, kasi 8 municipalities, and in every municipalities, there are like terminologies that are actually distinct sa every municipality. So, ang ginawa namin sa questionnaire, yun, translate namin into Cebuano, and then nilagay namin lahat ng mga suggestions nila kung paano process ng corn farming, finalo namin yung paano yung process na sinuggest ng mga corn farmers themselves, at saka ng mga corn coordinators na in-approach din namin na, regarding sa project. So nabago pati yung mga terms. Nilagay namin yung mga terms na ginagamit per municipality about sa process ng pagtatanim ng mais. So, yun. Dahil sa ginawa namin na I think from 5 pages, naging 15 pages yung nagawa namin na survey instrument. But of course, it was like formatted in a way na simple at madaling maintindihan ng enumerators at the same time ng mga corn farmers, tatanungin ng mga enumerators na identify namin. So that's actually how important participant observation is, in a way how it would help you ask sensible questions in the native language. And participant observation as well reduces the problem of activity of people changing their behavior when they know they are being studied. So yung sinabi ko kanina. So hindi sila nagre-react if nandun ka sa community. They continue with their business. And that's actually a very important thing. So participant observation gives you an intuitive understanding of what's going on in a culture. And allows you to speak with confidence about the meaning of the data. So, because you're actually immersed in the community, you know how you're going to analyze the data. You can already like put the meaning sa mga observation mo. So, kanina, sinabi kanina, di ba, na like, paano i-code yung mga data. Kasi yung, kahit your observation, your notes, can be part of, of the data that you'll be, it's actually part of your data that you'll be analyzing in the future, that will be coding, you will be coding in the future together with your the transcript of your key informant interview and the focus group discussion. So kasali yon sa i-analyze mo. Because of participant observation, you'll be able to analyze, the meaning of your observation. Hindi lang siya yung, ito yung ginawa nila. So anong meaning ng ginawa nila? Anong meaning ng ritual na ginawa nila? Anong meaning ng ginagawa nila, for example, sa kasal? Anong meaning ng ginagawa nila before planting corn and then after or during harvest? So malalaman mo yun because you're actually immersed, you immerse yourself in the community. Okay. And then many research problems simply cannot be addressed adequately by anything except participant observation. So mayroon man kailangan talaga ng participant observation. So of course, hindi yun automatic na pupunta ka doon, mag-observe ka. Kasi, di ba, alam mo kung sa mga maliit na komunidad, alam nila kung sinong outsider eh. So hindi lang pupunta, di ba, yung napag-usapan na last time about research ethics, the importance of asking permission from the community, from LGU, from the barangay level, or kay kanino pa, importante yun, even before doing participant observation. Kailangan, of course, may consent. Kasi kung pupunta ka lang doon, mag-observe ka, malalaman nila na, ma-identify nila talaga na you're an outsider. But of course, depende sa research na ginagawa mo. So there are 5 dimensions in participant observation. You have the role of the observer, your portrayal of your role to others, the portrayal of a study purpose to others, and the duration of observation, of course, the focus of the observations. All right. So for the role of the observer, it can be full participant observation, it can be partial participant observation, or onlooker observation as outsiders. Again, depende sa research na ginagawa mo. There are researchers, there are ethnographies. Sa unang, of course, babasahin mo yung mga ginawa or sa mga diniscuss ng mga nakaraang araw regarding ethnographic research. Mayroon talaga mga research na mag-iisa sila sa community for several months, and there are even researchers who stayed in the community for several years, and that is the full participant observation. While the participant observation is just, when like if you're doing your MA and you're also like you're doing ethnographic research, but at the same time you still have you have still coursework, so you need to and then malayo yung community na malayo yung area of research mo, so pupunta ka doon sa community and then mag-observe ka and then you stay for several days or siguro isang araw and then babalik ka naman. So that's example of partial participant observation. And the looker observation as outsider, so it's like also a research. Like for example, if you're doing a research about HIV, AIDS, and pupunta ka sa area kung saan maraming like may mga bars or saan may mga ang tawag doon nightlife. Yun. Mag-observe ka paano ba yung nightlife at paano ba yung example. So sometimes you going to do like onlooker like onlooker ka lang or an outsider ka observing, for example, paano yung ginagawa or kung sa madaling araw. I remember one of my teachers sharing experience in conducting a research study about HIV and AIDS, and the research respondents are, you know, the users are those who are actually like sa mga areas, sa mga peer areas, pumunta sila doon, and eventually because of they were able to the interviewers before they conducted the interview, they were already hanging out in the area, so medyo familiar na yung mga respondents sa kanila. And eventually nag open up yung mga participants in those areas sa kanila regarding their use of drugs. Hindi sa HIV and AIDS, it's about illegal drug use. So that's an example of how you can be like observing as an outsider. Okay. And another is the portrayal of roles to others. So there's like overt observation. They're also observer not known by some but not others. And they're also like covert observation. But for anthropology, what you actually do is overt observation, observation, which is actually known to others, but probably not to other people in the community. So in overt observation, subjects know that observations are being made and who the observer is. So pinapaalam sa community na I'm the researcher, I'm from this school, and I'm doing research about this and that, and the objective of my research is this and that. So that is overt observation. For the observer role is known by some but not others. Di ba minsan sinasabi mo, for example, sa kapitan, sinasabi mo sa iba sa key-informant mo, but sa mga hindi mo key-informant, dun sa community, hindi nila alam, minsan, hindi mo rin masasabi minsan sa kanila. For example, part ng community na hindi na ang tingin ng tao baka ano yan, pinsan lang yan ni or pamangkin lang yan ni kapitan kaya pupunta dito. You can still to do your participant observation. Hindi alam ng lahat na anong papel mo sa community, but of course it's not as if you're conscious na hindi mo sabihin sa kanila, but may bagong opportunity na pwede mo explain sa kanila kung sino ka, sinasabi naman, ba? Ito yung covert observation. It is subjects do not know that observations are being made or that there is an observer. Ito yung mas mahirap. But hindi naman to depende. Hindi pa ako naka-encounter ganito na may ginagawang covert observation. But usually in doing participant observation, it will be like overt observation, or that the people in the community, most of the people in the community are actually aware of what your purpose or what you're doing in the community. How do you portray your study purpose to others? The same way, it can be full explanation, it can be partial explanation. Okay, so hindi ko change ko yung color ng covert or explanation or false explanation or deception, because of course in doing principal observation we don't do that. Okay, unless remember ko, di ba, pag may binagawa like by-bus operation ng mga police, di ba? That is covert operation. And there's like false explanation of your presence there, like by-bus operation. But for doing ethnography, it will always be full explanation. You explain the purpose of your research to the community. As I remember, again, in one of the research, it's a survey research. And then we went to this community. And in this community in Cebu, medyo kilala sila about sa mga doon recently may namatay doon na isang kilalang sinasabi nilang drug lord. So when we went there, may mga kasama kaming graduating students na matangkad na bata. Tapos we were actually assigned different households. And then kami na mga babae, madali kaming nakatapos kami ng ilang households, so nakasiguro 20 or 40 households. Sa kanya, hindi niya natapos yung mga households niya nung yung kasama naming graduating student na lalaki. Kasi natatakot pala, may mga lista kasi kami ng mga bahay ng mga households na interviewin namin. So, tinatanong namin, kilala mo ba ito si Juan de la Cruz? Ay, oo ma'am, ganyan. O, ito po yung bahay nila. Tapos hindi siya sinasabihan kung saan ang bahay ni ganito, ng ganito. Kailangan niyang bumalik sa next day. Bumalik yung next day, hindi pa rin siya, hindi siya talaga sinasabihan, hindi siya parang walang sumasama sa kanya, walang point out sa kanya saan yung mga respondents niya. And eventually the third day, I think sinamahan siya ng namin ng team leader. Doon na-realize namin bakit pala hindi siya sinasabihan kasi natakot ang iba, nakala nila nasa taga siya, PIDEA siya. But yun ang nangyari. So even if actually nag-explain naman siya, may full explanation naman. May full explanation naman kung anong ginagawang research, mayroon namang may ID, may pinakitang permit. Before going to the community, we go to the barangay first, and then usually the barangay tanod would direct us to the area, ganyan. But importante talaga yung full explanation para mas maging kampante yung mga tao sa community. Hindi sila mag-iisip na kung ano-ano at mas madali kang makakuha ng data about sa research mo. Okay? So, importante yun. And then the duration of observation. So, when you do participant observation, it's not actually, hindi ibig sabihin na being strict na sobrang tagal. Gaya ng ginawa ng mga anthropologists ng unang panahon, ilang years o ilang months sila mag-iisip sa lugar. So depende sa research na ginagawa mo. So it can be, merong iba, single observation, several observations, or long-term multiple observation. But usually for ethnographic research, it will be several observation. Mahirap yung single observation lang. So it will be always several observation or long-term multiple observation. So kailangan pabalik-balik ka sa area. And dun mo ma-realize na minsan yung mga nalaman mo nung first few months na visit mo, sa pagbalik mo ulit doon ng ilang months o ilang days, may malalaman ka naman na bago about sa mga tao na pinag-aaralan mo or sa research na ginagawa mo. So, that's actually the duration of doing participant observation. Again, depende sa research na ginagawa mo. According to Russell Werner, depende daw. For example, kung ang ginagawa mong research is familiar ka na, palagi ka, for example, ang research mo is about pag-inom ng like ng tuba, and then like umiinom ng tuba, and then yung respondents mo yung sa community na pinag-aaral mo, taga doon ka lang sa community. So of course, hindi na ganoon ka long term yung gagawin mong observation. Kasi prior to doing research, meron ka ng observation na ginawa at kailangan mo lang i-verify or kailangan mo lang palaliman yung mga data na observe mo in relation to your research. So, and then, of course, the focus of the observation. So you have also the narrow focus, expanded or broad focus. So in doing participant observation, what's actually very important is the broad and expanded focus. So you don't just focus on a single element. You look into the different set of factors or variables and the holistic view. And in doing ethnographic research should always be holistic of the situation, setting, subjects, etc. So the broad focus is very important. And what to observe, of course, you have the setting, the human and social environment, activities and behaviors, the informal interactions and unplanned activities of people, the language of program participants, nonverbal communication, their gestures, and physical clues left behind the scene, what does not happen, and other surprise findings. So those are the things that you need to observe in doing participant observation, in doing ethnographic research. So these are the things. It's actually like broad example of things that you need to observe. So you will not be able to understand the meaning, for example, of the nonverbal communication of people in the community if hindi ka naka-immerse sa community, if hindi ka pumupunta palagi sa community, if you did not spend time interacting with people, hindi mo maintindihan yun, hindi mo maintindihan ang meaning ng nonverbal language nila or nonverbal communication nila. At hindi mo rin ma-realize o ma-identify na minsan may mga words na merong iba-ibang meaning. at iba-ibang pamamaraan ng paggamit ng mga words. So kung isang beses ka lang pupunta doon, isang beses ka lang mag-interview ka lang, meron kang survey instrument. So iba yung data na makukuha mo kung ikaw mismo ay naka-immerse sa community, you're really doing participant observation. So these are the different stages of participant observation according to H. Russell Bernard. So you have first is the initial contact. Okay, so initial contact, when you do the initial contact, of course, many field workers would experience like a kind of euphoria. Parang mag-excite ka, happy ka to begin studying the new culture. But of course, the first, the initial contact, hindi ganoon lahat ang reaction ng iba. Minsan, akala mo, madali yung research mo, pupunta ka dun sa community, pupunta ka sa community, ay, okay lang kasi excited ako, gusto ko, malaman ko talaga, first time ko nung ginagawa nila. Then mapunta mo dun, and then you're ready, naka-backpack ka, and then papunta mo dun, nakita mo na, so iba, minsan ang iba daw, natakot, diba? Parang gusto lang mag-back out, ay, hindi pala, pakala ko, madali lang, mahirap pala. So, it's actually like, my experience yun ng isang researcher. But of course, depende sa yung motivation mo in doing your research, your objective, at especially kung gusto mo makatulong sa community, madali mo siyang ma-overcome eventually, di ba? And of course, in initial contact, you also experience culture shock. Yung naka-experience ka rin ng parang uncomfortable stress response. Diba? Na pupunta ka sa isang lugar na hindi mo nakasanayan, gagawa ka ng mga bagay na hindi mo nakasanayan gawin. Na akala mo dati madali lang pero mahirap pala. So in a way that is actually you experience the process. Hindi lang yung culture shock, hindi lang naman yan nangyayari kung pupunta ka talaga sa ibang bansa. Even within our country, naka-experience ka ng culture shock. Even for example, culture shock din yung mga Cebuano, ang Waray, na pupunta sa Cebu. Like ako, Waray ako. I speak Waray and I'm a Waray-Waray. Ano pagpunta ko sa first time ko sa Cebu, culture na may parang culture shock ako sa pamamaraan ng pag-joke ng Cebuano. Mga loud ang Waray, parang matatapang, pero may ibang rin yung Cebuano no pag-joke sila na akala ko galit sila. Yun pala parang it's just a normal way of parang talking with your friends. Buang ka, buang ko niyo. But it's like actually a normal way. Like it's like parang lang sa kanila yon, parang normal lang na part sa conversation if you're actually like friends mo yung kausap mo. So it's ganun din. Pupunta ka sa lugar, paano sila makipag-usap. Yung minsan yung mga Cebuano pag nakakarinig sila sa Waray, sabi nila ay matapang ang Waray, ganyan, parang palaging galit. But pag immerse ka na, pag nanonood sa community, maalaman mo na ganyan lang pala sila magsalita. But yun pala, pag nag-i-invite pala sila sa iyo na kumain, akala mo galit sila na pinapakain ka, pero yun pala sila, very accommodating pala sila, hospitable pala sila. Gusto talaga nilang na kumain ka, harap ka nila sa pagkainan. So kasi yun ang na-experience and the initial stages of doing participant observation. And of course, after your initial reaction, after overcoming your culture shock, and sometimes hindi talaga nawawala yung mga of course hindi yung nawawala basta-basta sa'yo, but eventually you actually find a way to not offend the people in the community by your own biases and your own understanding of things. So now overcome you will discover a lot of things already. You will be discovering the obvious. So you will learn things that hindi mo maalaman if hindi ka pumunta doon sa community. Ma-discover mo na magpapasalamat ka. Ito na yung process na magpapasalamat ka. Ay, buti na lang ginawa ko to. Buti na lang hindi ako nag-give up nung una kong pumunta dito sa lugar na to. Buti na lang hindi ako nag-change ng topic nung minsan ako naka-encounter ako na ganitong problema. So this is actually the way na ito na yung panahon na i-maximize mo na. You're going to write down notes, you're going to write in your diary, you're going to jot down notes, you're going to start your analysis of the data, sinusulat mo, gagawa ka na. Mag-start ka na dito. Doon mo na malaman ang mga dapat mong malaman, ma-discover ang dapat mong ma-discover in the process. If you're able to build rapport with the people, you're able to build their trust. And of course, after those things, there's also like a break. There's a mid-field work break, which usually comes after several months after doing your participant observation, your ethnographic research. Importante yung break. Kasi it's the time na, of course, mapapagod din yung informant mo. So, kailangan mo rin umalis na sa lugar in a way para rin i-process mo, i-analyze mo yung lahat ng data na nag-gather mo sa area. So, sa study mo. So, kailangan mo siyang i-process. Kailangan mo rin ng break para ma-process yung mga nakuha mong information. At the same time, again, magkaroon din ng pahinga yung mga informant mo, especially yung key informant mo sa research na ginagawa mo. Diba ganun din yun, pag halimbawa, pag malayo ka sa family mo, namimiss mo sila, pero pag matagal kayong magkasama, especially nung quarantine because of COVID-19, mo na-realize na doon nagsisimula yung conflict sa siblings mo, sa parents mo, kasi matagal kayong nagkasama. Pero pag halimbawa, pwede ka na magbakasyon, pwede ka na umalis, bumalik ka na sa work mo, bumalik ka na sa city, doon namimiss ka na naman. So parang ganun din yung process ng paggawa ng research, especially if you stay in the community for a very long time. Kailangan yung part na mamimiss ka nila para sa pagbalik mo, mas madali na naman silang makapagbibigay sa iyo ng mga information na kailangan mo sa research na ginagawa mo. Okay. And another is focusing. So after the break, you will have a better idea of exactly what kinds of data you're lacking. So and your sense of problem also come more sharply into focus. So after, doon mo rin malaman, ano ba yung mga data na kulang? So ito yung nakuha ko ng data, ito yung mga galing sa interview, ito yung nakuha ko galing sa participant observation, ito yung nakuha ko galing sa FGD. Ano ba yung mga data na kailangan kong kulang ko na hindi ko pa nakuha, na kailangan kong balikan doon sa community? Ano yung mga dapat kong baguhin sa ginagawa kong pag-aaral? So, in doing ethnographic research, hindi ganun ka sa strict na ito lang dapat. Ito yung ginawa mo objective sa una, dapat ganito na. Hindi ganun yung paggawa ng ethnographic research. Kailangan alam mo kung kailan mo babaguhin yung mga pasiuna mong ginawa. Based sa, of course, sa initial or sa data gathering na nakuha o sa mga data gathered na nag-gather mo sa iyong study. So, yun. Kailangan mong tignan kung ano ba yung dapat mong i-focus, ano ba yung diba sabi nila is even the most focused research design will have to be modified in the field. In some cases, you may find yourself making radical changes in your design based on what you find when you get to the field and spend several months actually collecting data. There's nothing wrong or unusual about this. Walang masama kung babaguhin mo or kailangan mong i-tweak ang ibang ang pamaraan mo ng paggawa ng research or ang objectives ng research mo or even yung mga questions mo, depende sa ano yung nakuha mo sa research na ginawa mo. Right? And then of course you also have after you have break and then you're focused and then you went back to the community and then makaka-experience ka rin ng exhaustion and then pagod ka, parang wala ka na makukuhang data, parang I'm planning to stay here sa isang taon, but ngayon 7th month ko pa lang, parang nakuha ko na lahat. Parang ano pa bang kailangan kong tanungin dito sa mga tao? Parang nakuha ko na, parang lahat na ng event na napuntahan ko na. Parang lahat ng questions na tanong ko na sa kanila. So nakaka-feel ka ng exhaustion. Pero of course, kailangan pa rin, of course, kailangan mo ng second break. Kailangan mo ulit i-reassess yung sarili mo at kailangan mo balikan yung mga data and then i-understand ulit ano bang mga meaning na ginawa mo ng mga data na kinuha mo. Kailangan mo na. So, because alam natin lahat na kahit kailan hindi mo makukuha, hindi mo ma-capture ang lahat ng aspeto ng pamumuhay ng isang tao. Kahit ilang taon ka pa nag-stay sa lugar na yun. Imposible na makuha mo ang lahat. Diba? So baka kailangan mo lang mag-pause, tumigil, maghinga ng malalim, alis ka ulit sa lugar and then bumalik ka naman para mas meron ka namang fresh eyes na naman at okay ka na sa pagbabalik mo para magpatuloy ka sa ginagawa mong pag-aaral. So, yun. And then, of course, the last stage of in doing participant observation is leaving the field. So, importante, it's last stage of participant observation is leaving the field. So, importante to na mapaalam ka na sa kanila, tapos salamat sa ginawa nilang sa cooperation nila sa research mo. And of course, but in sa mga kahit sinong gumawa ng ethnography at nagstay sa lugar ng matagal, hindi basta-basta mapuputol yung ugnayan mo sa mga tao dun sa lugar. Sa example sa mga research, mga anthropologists, nagagawa pa silang ninang ng mga informants nila sa field. So eventually they would stay in contact with those people in the community, and from time to time you visit the community. And sometimes mas naisip kang mga topic na pwede mong i-develop at babalik ka dun sa community to gather more data. So ganun, hindi talaga napuputol yung ugnayan mo sa mga tao. But of course, eventually, you need to really leave the field and thank the people in the community sa ginawa mo, sa pag-accommodate nila sa'yo. Alright, so yeah, that's it. That's my discussion. So do you have any questions or clarifications? And Ma'am Ding would help me answer your questions. So may mga tanong ba?
Okay, so if our participants want to clarify some points regarding the discussion of Ma'am Marge Dino, you can type in your questions po through our chat box.
Right. But we will have an activity pala. So while others are communicating questions, we're going to have another activity in line with our participant observation discussion. Let me just.
Marge,
Ma'am Ding,
pwede sigurong
ano?
lang yung open forum mamaya. Kasi
Mamaya nila. Sige. Okay.
related naman lahat ng
Oo nga. Oo.
i-discuss.
Yes, Ma'am Ding.
Okay, ma'am. Sige, later na lang po ang open
Sige.
forum.
Oo.
Pag lang ako activity, Ma'am Ding, yung isa. Yung last, second.
Pwedeng may muna ako
Sige, Ma'am Ding.
ng mo. Tapos ka na sa participant observation.
Yes.
Okay. Sandali lang ha. So hindi na putol-putol yung yung boses ko.
Hindi na.
So malaking bagay pala talaga yung wire. Yung cable. Sige. Okay. So I don't know if the participants have read the classic examples of descriptions or ethnographies, or not really. The other one was not really an ethnography, but it showed a detailed description of a culture. So kung tingnan natin yung wait. So we gave, although late na siguro nabigay or but maybe you can read it later, or you can read the two reading materials later on. We gave out sample materials wherein one describes the culture of the Nasirema. So if you look at Nasirema, if you turn it around, you start from it's actually about American culture. So the way the author wrote it was making the familiar strange. So he described the culture that he was so used to, and he described it in such a way that it was strange. So like a toothbrush was described as a bunch of hug hairs, and then you put it in your mouth. So if someone will read it and he doesn't know anything about that culture, then he will say, oh, that's so strange. and there was also a description about maidens dressed in white, and then when you go into this latipso, so if you turn it around again, latipso is actually hospital. So the way he wrote about American culture was actually making the familiar strange. So he described it in very detail that even the American who is listening to the description cannot anymore um, see that it was actually his own culture that is being described. On the other hand, the second reading material was regarding the culture of the Yanomamo. So the author talked extensively about how he did field work in this place and how he adjusted and made preparations, and um, he wanted to describe the culture of the Yanomamo, which he considered as strange, and make it more familiar. However, he also met some problems along the way in doing field work. So doing field work is not uh, like just your it's not a very easy task to do, because there are a lot of factors that affect um your field work. So trying to describe a culture that you're not familiar with is very difficult. Like the ethnographer's experience with the Yanomamo, he was deceived by the Yanomamo. They told him stories that actually did not exist. They told him about their names that they just invented. So an outsider could not distinguish whether it is actually what is happening, or it's actually the truth, because people can deceive you. So that's why, as Marjury emphasized earlier, you have to go to the field, build rapport, and talk to people not just once, but for a number of times, visiting there, going there, maybe living there for a while, so that you can really get into what this culture is all about. So that you can provide a detailed description. So when you provide a detailed description, you always assume that the others or people reading your work do not know anything about the culture that you are describing. So this time, you have to have a detailed description. So if you have a detailed description, how do you do it? So you describe the culture thickly, or a thick description of the culture. So you look at the behavior, you look at cultural events, you look at material culture, both from your perspective as an outsider, and more so from the insider's perspective. And you look at the context. So from participant observation, um, you have your outsider's perspective because you're the one observing, but you can validate with the insiders on what you have observed, and then you have to describe the context. So the output is a thick description. So if we look at thick description, this term was invented by social anthropologists Clifford Geertz and Gilbert Ryle. And then thick description gives detailed descriptions and interpretations of situations observed by the researcher. And it also writes detailed narratives. So it's not just the researcher, but also the narratives of the people that are in that culture. So explaining situations and their background context. So you look at the context, you look at their narratives, and as well as your own observations. So you provide the background information necessary for understanding the relevance, the meanings, and intentions that underpin social interactions. So it's not just what you see, what you hear, there's more. What are the meanings of what you see? And it should be from their perspective. So that's why you have to have a holistic description of culture. So like for example, you look at the relationship between the different aspects of culture. So if you're studying religion, you can also see the arts and expression related to religion. Like for example, the sculptures, the paintings that have a religious ring to it. And then maybe you can link it also with child rearing, how a child learns religion and the language being used, etc., etc. So you look at the internal dynamics of the culture as well as the external forces and the changing environmental context, as well as changes that have happened over time. So those descriptions will contribute to the holistic description of culture, or to the thick description of the culture that you are studying. So from participant observation, um, this is one. From participant observation, um, how do we get into, because more the participant observation is more on your observations as a researcher, external to the to the context that's being studied. And then you can ask, no, while doing observation, you can ask people for the explanations about the behavior that you have observed, about the event that you have observed, about the artifacts that they're using. um you can actually ask them. So that is the link in using participant observation in doing ethnography and seeking out key informants who can tell you more, who can tell you the details of what you have observed. So that's why we are going to discuss next key informant interviewing. But before that, as Marge said earlier, we have one more exercise that's related to participant observation as well as thick descriptions. So did you already send the link?
Okay, I'm going to send the link. Let me just.
So there's a link, again, the same thing as what we had earlier. I think it's another application
Okay.
being used
Right. So
because you will be doing a longer description.
okay, so I'm going to. This is the link. So you need to describe the place where you're currently located in at least 5 sentences. So earlier we asked you to describe, diba? You just ask you to provide just one observation. So this time, describe the place where you're currently located in at least 5 sentences. So here's the link. Let me just share. So that is the link to Padlet, an application. So in Padlet, you don't need to write your name para mas komportable mo, hindi mo na kailangan ilagay yung pangalan mo. Tapos may option yan na comment. So later pwede kayong mag-comment sa iba you're going to. Pwede kayong mag-comment sa ginawa ng ibang kasama niyo. So let us know if na-access niyo yung link. Na-open ba yung link? You just need to double click sa sa space, and then may option na yun, makakapaglagay ka na ng nasagot mo. Ayan.
In how many minutes, Marge?
Ano lang minutes mo, mga 5 minutes, okay ba yun?
1 minute per sentence.
Ano ba yun?
Mga 5 minutes siguro. Just
Okay, 5 minutes. So
for the
2:47.
participants to be able to compose a 5-sentence description of where they're currently located. So hopefully, what we have discussed earlier can help us in formulating the detailed description.
Yes. So 2:48. 47. So we're going to, so Ma'am Ding will process your answer at siguro balik ta Ma'am Ding mga 2:50, 52.
Okay. We'll just wait a bit.
All right. Okay. Ma'am Ding. Let me share the screen again.
Okay na?
Okay na.
Ako yung mo share screen?
Sige, pwede sa ikaw, Ma'am Ding, para mas paan.
Okay.
Sharing na ko.
We'll just wait for the those who are still typing.
Or,
Wait ha. Okay. Okay, so we were seeing here descriptions, even if it's just 5 sentences. So our guide here is that we always assume that people reading your work do not know anything about what you are describing. So if we read your work, then we will know. So from what we read, then we can picture out the situation of where you are located or of the place that you are describing. So based on the let's just have this first one, this one. Currently staying in a place where the wall is white. Oh, we can see the wall is white. And then there are some paintings hanging on it. So the white wall and the paintings. And then there's one electric fan. And then the sounds of vehicles. And then a housemate who is also attending a webinar. And then a baby crying in the from a neighbor's house. And then the person describing is not using a headphone. Ano, he is using a headphone, but still he can hear those sounds. Okay. So what can you say about this description? Anyone? Can you picture out the place given the description given by this person? Anyone can comment. I think Marge can.
yes, they can actually like, they can add comment
Yeah.
on the post of their
Okay.
colleagues. So pwede sila maka-comment if
Person attending a webinar but disturbed. Huh? Okay, so given this description, I think we can picture out the place where that's being described because it's very detailed. The color, the things that are seen, even the sounds, no? So this is a good description. We can see this one, like for example, the room is color pink. So from the white, we see a pink room. And then good ambience, conducive for learning. The bed is soft. Okay. So we can see also that there are descriptions that are objective, like the color pink, and then there's a bed, and then the sound of a chicken, and the sound of the phone, and then there's the aroma of the coffee. But there are also some aspects of the description that are quite subjective. Like for example, the good ambience conducive for learning. So what is a good ambience conducive for learning? So if we just take this as it is, maybe someone who reads this can picture out a room that's, I don't know, because for him, that's a good ambience conducive for learning. But another person could also picture out another setting or another context because for him, that's an ambience conducive for learning. So do you see what I mean? Our description should be more objective so that it could not be open to a lot of interpretations by different people. Okay, like for example, the bed is soft. So a soft bed, as what Marge earlier said, there's relativism. Like for example, for me, this is soft enough, but for others, it's not. But for others, it's soft. So it's open to different interpretations. And then also the fully ventilated. So fully ventilated, I can picture out it doesn't have any windows because it's fully ventilated, or does it have windows that are open, or does it have an electric fan for ventilation, or an exhaust fan? So it's again open for a lot of interpretations. Okay, so these are just comments. No, don't take it personally. We are here to learn, and we are just pointing out some aspects of the observations, because we would like you to improve on describing and providing a detailed description if you are using participant observation in doing your studies later on. And then this one, let's go to this next one. Again, there's a sweeping adjective. So just for you to take note, it's better not to use sweeping adjectives wherein you stop describing because you've already said this adjective. Like for example, our barangay is a beautiful place. So what's a beautiful place? It's very open to different interpretations. But here, it's already you have the breeze from the beach. So you can picture that out. And then the three islands, you can see the three islands. You can picture that out. So that's good. So there are just some very few descriptions that are still evaluations and very subjective and open for different interpretations. But if we compare it to your earlier output, the first output that the first exercise that we have, this is already very, very, very good. No, it's a very good output already, because we can already picture out not just using the adjectives, but the very details of the place that you are currently in. So this one, there's a monoblock white chair. So we can picture out a monoblock white chair. And then there's the main door. There's a 3-story building. And then there's a wooden table. And then there's a thermal scanner. No, you can, this is very detailed. And then other people are on their house renovation in our place. So this is very short. So I think this needs more details. And the other one, the people in the place has their own ways of living. So what are these? They have their own ways of living. Again, it's very short and lacks the details. The temperature is somewhat humid. People are adapted to the climatic condition. So how do you know the people are adapted? No? So maybe we can have more descriptions, more details in the descriptions. And maybe you can, Marge, can you also comment on some of the descriptions?
Yes, Ding. So I actually also can already imagine the saan sila ngayon because of very detailed description. Although sabi mo kanina may mga sweeping na mga description, but still those are very good adjectives or description of the place where they're currently at right now. So kailangan lang siguro mas detailed pa. So instead of, there's actually very good description already, but siguro pag sa actual na research, mas maganda if mas detalyado pa instead of giving those very So
Sweeping
yung sa
adjectives.
subjective na mga words or description, mas detailed pa. Pero ang ganda na, mas picture ko na kung saan sila ngayon. Parang kahit hindi tayo, hindi ako on ng camera.
Oh, meron pa dito, room temperature is 27 degrees Celsius. Oh, di ba? So you know because it's specific
Oo.
temperature. And there are 2 electric fans. And the person writing this is still sweating. So you can see the person sweating, and then there are 2 electric fans, and the room temperature is 27. And then there are curtains, and there's sunlight going in the windows, etc. So parang yung sabi ni Marge, we can already picture out, no, based on this detailed descriptions. But there are still some descriptions that are abbreviated, very short, lacks the details, and there are also some observations that are very sweeping, using the sweeping adjectives, and very general observations also. So maybe later on we can it takes a lot of practice. We also started with making such observations, but we have to be conscious that, especially when we're doing research and it's based on observations in the field, especially of cultures that you do not know of or that you are not familiar with, it's better to really describe in objectively and more details, so that people reading your work will understand or can picture out the situation that you are describing. Okay, I think that's it.
Hindi meron sa baba.
Congratulations. Meron pa ba sa baba?
Scroll down yan. Ayan, yung mga comments dyan. Ayan. There.
A bit happen, etc. My place is parang additional additional description. Okay. So congratulations. I think we learned something from the beginning of this session and until now. So we will continue now with the next part of this session, which is, wait, let me just share my screen. Okay, so as I have said, we need to have a holistic description of culture. And why? Why do we need to describe? Because we're doing ethnography. So from our field work, we learn from people and we describe their culture. So in doing field work, the first method, the very basic method that was discussed by Marge earlier, is participant observation. So you participate in their activities, you observe while participating, and then maybe you learn a new language from the experience of participating and observing, and then ask questions on the meanings of what you have observed, and then interview informants. So I will be focusing on these last two, asking questions and interviewing informants. So talagang partner yung participant observation saka yung key informant interviews. Kasi nung sabi ko kanina, we have to get not just the ethic, but more so the emic or the internal, the insider's point of view. So we learn from them. We do not assume that we know about them because we are from the university, but we assume that we do not know anything about them and that we are learning from them. Okay. So when you learn about culture, you look at what they do, so their behavior, and then the things that they make and use, so the artifacts. And then these are very observable. However, this third one, cultural knowledge, what people know, uh, this is this cannot be, um, you cannot learn, you cannot know what people know by just observing. So that's why you have to ask. You have to ask them. So who will you ask? So that is um, the point of this next method, which we'll be talking about this afternoon, key informant interviewing. So we do not just interview anyone, we interview key informants. So this method is really an integral part of ethnographic research. And then unlike a survey, doing survey interviews for a survey, in which you get a sample from the population, and then it's really looking at the extent of a phenomenon. This one, because it's qualitative, it's more on the depth, or it's more on the knowledge, it's more on the going deeper into the phenomenon, not just the extent of the phenomenon, but what are the details of such, no? So these informants are capable of providing adequate information about their culture. So it's important for you as researcher to choose good informants. So you do not just pick out anyone. We'll just interview you because you're the one who's here. No, you don't do that. You have to play the field first. You have to, like what Marge said, you have to immerse, you have to build rapport, etc. And then while doing that, you also look out for who are these people who know a lot about their culture and could be good informants. And then they are the ones that you will be asking about what they know about their culture, so that you will learn more, not just from the observations, but you learn more about their culture from people who are knowledgeable about various aspects of their culture. So the informants are selected for their competence rather than just for representativeness. So unlike a survey interview, wherein you have a sample, and then you interview these people so that they are representative of the population. It's not like that in key informant interviews. It's more on what they know and what they can share. So who are these good informants? These people are the ones that you can talk to easily. So yung hindi mahirap kausapin. Merong iba na marami silang alam pero ang hirap kausapin. Parang ayaw nilang magbigay ng information sa iyo. So, wag na yan. So, yung mga tao na you can talk to easily. And then they also understand what information you need from them. And they are glad to give this information to you or to get it for you. So, yung hindi mahirap kausapin, tapos yung gusto nilang mag-share ng information sa'yo, willing sila na mag-share sa'yo, and alam nila kung ano yung information na kailangan mo. Okay. And then lastly, this informant should be trustworthy. So yung example namin, yung yung Sayano Mamo. If you read that article, parang matatawa ka na parang parang you feel the experience of the researcher na marami na siyang notes, marami na siyang tapos pala hindi naman pala totoo lahat ng sinasabi ng informants niya. So he had to go back to square one. So you have to choose informants who are trustworthy, whom you can trust. And then these informants are also observant, reflective, and articulate. So they can talk to you, and then they know a lot of things because they observe, they reflect, no? So parang yung mga chismosa siguro. Pero you have to be careful also kasi yung ibang chismosa parang 1+1. Ito yung nangyari tapos may additional ganun. So hindi naman you have really to try to identify and see also the reputation of these people in the community and their role in the community. So important talaga yung participant observation kasi doon mo malalaman kung sino yung possible informants na ganito yung you can talk to them easily, they understand the information, they're glad to give the information, and you can trust them, no? Ganon. So if you have informants who are not willing to give the information to you, parang wala na rin yun, di ba? And if you have informants whom you cannot trust, so parang wala din yun. So you have to be careful in choosing your informants. So that's the first step. You don't just interview anybody. Okay, so how do you find them? Yun, yung sabi ko kanina, you play the field first. So yung diniscuss ni Marge kanina na participant observation, yun muna yung gawin mo. So that you can target several prospects. Parang, ito pwede siguro to when we talk about this aspect. Ito siya pwede siguro kung ganito. Kasi you have to check on their roles and statuses in the community also. So if you're studying about religion, the key informant is the religious person or the religious practitioner. So kung sa AP, parang may siguro sila parang healer or yung kung sa mga Muslim groups, yung imam o yung so mas marami silang alam. If you're studying about religion, if you're studying about medicinal practices, ethno-medicinal practices, then of course you find the person who is practicing healing in the community. Parang yung, for example, yung sa amin, yung sa research namin noon na ethno-medicinal practices, hinahanap talaga namin yung mga informants. Kasi yung ethno-medicinal practices na ginawa namin na study, it's more on the use of plants. So maraming types of healers, di ba? Maraming healer na nandun sa community. Yung iba, yung mga faith healer, yung your faith in God has made you well, mga ganun. Pero hindi sila gumagamit ng plants. Pero yung healer na parang magic, no? Parang mga yung mga laway nila sa yung may sakit, ganun. Kasi yung iba yung way nila sa healing. Pero yung hinahanap namin kasi yung gumagamit ng plants. So parang pumupunta-punta pa kami dun sa field muna tapos learn about these different healers in the community. And then later on we can identify, ito pala, itong taong to, siya yung gumagamit ng plants. So marami siyang alam about plants na ginagamit for healing. What part of the plant, how to prepare, and then how to administer, what type of ailments, mga ganun. So marami silang alam dun sa gusto mong research. Okay, so you have to identify these people through interacting with the different community members or different people in the community. So be sure also that the informants whom you will select will not prevent you from gaining access to other important informants. So yung meron ding mga informants na parang gusto nila ako lang yung interviewin mo, ako lang yung may alam. Hindi naman pwede yun, di ba? Hindi naman isang tao lang kasi if isang tao lang yung ini-interview mo, you don't have a way to validate kung yung sinasabi niya totoo ba talaga yun. So you have to validate with other informants in the community para you have a sort of triangulation of data that you get. Kasi if this informant will tell you, ako lang talagang may alam. I'm the only one. I'm the only source of information. Parang 'Di ba? Maging doubtful ka na rin na baka nag-iimbento siya. Kaya hindi niya gusto na may access ka sa ibang informant. So you should be wary about that. You should be careful. So yun, talagang you have to spend time in finding key informants para sa specific na ano mo. So kung ah, iba yung topic mo, so posible iba yung informants mo. Kung yung whole culture ang ano yung yung whole culture ang pinag-research mo, yung research mo is about the whole culture of this group. So there may be some informants on this aspect and then other informants on this aspect, etc., etc. Okay, so I think we have examples also of the works of our graduate students. It's accessible. We give out the links. It's accessible online yung mga sinulat nila. Although I don't know if we can relate kasi yung marami doon is more on urban anthropology kasi nga Cebu City kami, highly urbanized na ano. Pero meron din namang mga pwedeng it's more on the output rather than the culture being described. So yung isang output doon sa isang student namin noon, yung fish trade sa Pasil. Pasil is the central fish market in Cebu City. And the informants whom he chose are not just the sellers of the fish, but even the suppliers and even those in the middle. So parang he spent a lot of time in the market just to identify the different types of informants whom he will need to interview. So parang ganun. So hindi siya madali, hindi siya parang sige ikaw interviewin ka namin, okay, parang just for the sake of having an interview. Kasi we also have experiences with some students, especially the undergrad students. They will just say, I just interview my friend. Bakit your friend? Para madali. So hindi 'yun, di ba? Parang you're just doing the interview just for the sake of doing an interview. So it's not a key informant interview. Okay. So parang you need to play the field first so that you can identify the key informants, and then later on you can interview them. So how do you do these interviews? So interviews are not just the formal ones, no? You can also do your interviews informally during the course of an ordinary day. And you interview people in the natural setting. You do not tell them to, okay, you come to my office so that I can interview you. Parang hindi ganun, di ba? Kasi sa ethnography, you have to go to the field. So parang you have to go there and then observe, and then while observing you can just ask around, no, informally. So while you're there you just ask, anong ginagawa niya doon? Nag-aano siya ganito. Ano ba yung ginagamit nila? So parang informal lang, tapos you just recall what's being shared with you, and that's already part of your data. That's already part of what you have gathered in the field. Parang informal lang, pero you get a lot of information from these informal interviews with people in the natural setting. So why the natural setting? Kasi the natural setting brings out also the natural behavior and what they can share because they're in their place, no? Parang maiba yun if you take them out of that place and then you interview them somewhere else. Kakainin mo dun sa restaurant, dalhin mo sa kung saan tapos parang may kulang na kasi wala na siyang mga reference like ito ganyan. wala na kasi you're bringing him outside the natural setting. So it's also important. Pero ngayon, pandemic, yun yung question ng iba. Pandemic, so how can we go to the natural setting? Yun yung challenge. Some are already braving it in the field, but make sure lang na vaccinated na siguro. Parang tapos na yung second dose, tapos na yung 14 days after the second dose. Para you may go out in the field and have lesser risk siguro, pero still observe the minimum health protocols. Parang ganun. Pero some, right now, those are not yet vaccinated and it's very risky to go out and go to the field. Yung iba, iba na lang yun yung research nila. So hindi na yung talagang you have to go out. Yung iba parang digital ethnography. So look for communities in the online world and observe these communities. So parang natural setting pa rin yun, di ba? Kasi yung natural setting nila is in the World Wide Web. So ganun. So we have to be parang creative nowadays because pandemic time kasi we cannot risk ourselves just to learn about what's happening. We also have to protect ourselves. Pero kung okay naman ang situation na pwede namang pumunta kasi wala namang mga sabi nila doon daw sa bundok walang COVID. nag field tour kami the other week. Punta kami doon sa mga bundok-bundok ng Cebu. Sabi ng mga tao doon, wala namang COVID dito. Yung mga tao doon walang face mask. Kami kami naka-face mask, naka-face shield pa. Tapos yung mga tao doon walang face mask, walang face shield, wala. Parang hindi nila ba't nagfe-face shield to mga taong to. So, yun. Pero you have to also verify kung may cases ba, etc. So it really depends, no? It really depends on where you're doing or your research, but you have to add that to the preparations about ensuring health safety. Yun. So, yung informal interviewing, ito yung yung wala lang, informal, parang nandun ka sa field tapos may nakita ka, you can ask or you can just talk to this person and then ask informally about something, about their culture. So there's a total lack of structure or control, no? So the informant can just go on and on and on and talk to you about these things, especially if he or she is very knowledgeable about the topic that you are wanting to learn about, no? So okay. So yung lang sa informal interviewing, it's also parang awkward if you get out if you take out a notebook and then start writing down what your informant is telling you. Parang awkward, di ba? So mas awkward din kung you take out an audio recorder and start recording, etc. And it's also a violation of ethics if you just secretly record what he's saying, di ba? I think tomorrow or kailan ba yung meron kayong schedule about research ethics? Parang may ibang session about ethics. So you cannot just do that. So that's why important din yung ability of the researcher to remember or to recall conversations in the course of the day in the field. So it's important that when you go back home, for example, or if you are living in the community, if you go back to where you're staying, you take out your notebook and you start jotting down and writing so that you can unburden your memory, di ba? yung memory ng tao parang hindi computer, di ba? Parang walang mga 1 gig na memory yung tao. Parang ano ba, 32 MB or 16 MB or lower than that pa siguro, no? Yung mga memory natin. Especially as we age. Tulad ko, I forget a lot of things nowadays kasi parang tumatanda na. So we have to unburden your memory every day. So you have to have your field notes. So we'll talk about field notes later. So yun, yung importance ng you remember these things that are being told to you and you write them down right away so that you will not forget. Kasi kung when you go back tapos ay naantok na ako, tulog muna ako. When you wake up in the morning parang hala, ano yung sabi nung yung kausap ko kahapon? Teka ha. So parang nawala na yung mo. So it's better if you really write it down right away when you are no longer in the field. Okay. So it's used, informal interviewing is used throughout fieldwork to build greater rapport and to uncover new topics of interest. So parang lang, yung parang nakatambay ka lang, di ba? Tapos you ask things about life, about what's happening, about yung parang wala lang, di ba? So parang sabi nila yung hanging out daw na nandun ka lang, you're there, and then you ask questions while you're talking to them, etc. So parang at the same time, you're building rapport, but at the same time, you're also learning from the people and you're getting the data that you need for your research. So this is very important, the informal interviewing. Pero meron din namang unstructured interviewing. Yung parang aside from the hanging out interviews that you have or the informal interviews that you have, when you are able to identify these key informants who know a lot about what you're wanting to study, it's also important to have an unstructured interview, wherein you sit down with your informant and then you really interview. So you have a clear plan in mind. You have a clear plan in mind on what you'll be asking, and then because it's unstructured, it's still you still have minimum control over the informant's responses. So this is used usually if you have lots and lots of time, like in long-term field work. So those who are really doing ethnography and then they're living in the community or they visit the community very often, they can use this unstructured interviews, no? But there are also researchers who have time limit for their researches. We only have 6 months, for example. We're doing research on this topic and then we only have 6 months. So you cannot really do all these things, informal, structured. Of course, you can still do this, but not too much. You can schedule semi-structured interviews. So you have an interview guide. You write down a list of questions or topics that you need to be covered in your interview. And just like unstructured interviewing, it could be freewheeling, but you have an interview guide. But you don't use the interview guide in front of the informant. It's just like, you know that this topic should be covered. You know that you have to ask these questions. But in the actual interview, it seems like it's still freewheeling. But you have a guide. You have a guide in mind. You have topics in mind, and you're fully in control of what you want from that interview. So it's semi-structured because you already have the list of topics or the list of questions, although the conversation is still freewheeling. You don't say, okay, my first question is number 1. No. So it's different from a survey interview wherein you really do that. First question, what is your name? Oh, etc. If the elections were held today, who will you vote for president? If the elections were held today, who will you vote as mayor? So parang may question talaga na one by one, etc. And you have to follow that. Here, because it's quali, you only have a set of topics or a set of questions that you have, and then it's just in the back of your mind. So it's still freewheeling. And there's also, sorry. So that's why we don't have the full structured interview. Because if you have a full structured interview, it might affect what the person you're interviewing will tell you. Because that's the difficulty also of researchers, no? People can just tell you about what they think you want to know. And they won't tell you any more details because they think you don't want to know about those details. No? So the people that you're interviewing also have like they also have a notion of what you are there for. So they see you as a researcher. This researcher just wants to ask me about these things, so I'll just tell him about these things. So if you have the semi-structured, the unstructured, and the informal interviewing, you uncover a lot of things which they will not tell you if you really conduct a formal interview wherein you are the researcher, he is the informant, you are the researcher, you have a set of questions, because it may block some of the details that they could tell you if it's not formal. Okay. Okay. So steps. So how do you do aside from identifying? So assuming that you already identified, no? You already know that these people will be your informants. So when you talk to them, especially in semi-structured interviews, and also in unstructured interviews, you assure them of anonymity, that you will not what they're telling you is confidential, and then you will not link what they're telling you to their names. So that's also very important, because sometimes, especially if our topics are sort of sensitive, these people will not tell you anything if they sense that they will be put in danger if ever they will tell you something. So like for example, you want to know about the like militarization in their area, for example. So they will really be afraid that what they will tell you will be attributed to these people who tell you these things, and then it might reach other people whom they're afraid of, etc., etc. So as a researcher, you should assure them of anonymity and confidentiality of the information they will be sharing with you. And then you also explain that you are there to know or to learn from them what they think and what their observations are. You emphasize that you are a person who doesn't know anything about what you're wanting to research about, and that they are the ones who know a lot of things about what you're researching about. So you explain that you simply want to know what they think, what they know, what their observations are. So from their point of view, not from your point of view, not from anyone else's point of view, but from the people who are part of that culture. No? So you explain. You explain also that what they will share to you, what their opinions are, what their observations are important. So That's very important, no, in doing research, that you give importance to what they will share with you. So that they will feel that huh, what I'm saying is important. So I have to tell this, I have to say this, I have to share this. So things like that. And then you also explain why, or why you're trying to learn from them. So this is more on the objectives of your study. And then you tell them that you are trying to learn from them. So you're not trying to impose something, but you're trying to learn from them. And why? Why are you trying to learn from them? Because they might be suspicious. Why is this person asking me about these plants that are for medicinal purposes? Maybe he is from a pharmaceutical company, and then this pharmaceutical company will patent, and then we can no longer use, and then the pharmaceutical company will get richer and richer, etc. So they will suspect, no? So you have to explain that you're trying to learn from them and why. And then you have to ask permission, of course. That's part of ethics. You have to ask permission from the informants if you will record. So recording interviews could be done with the unstructured and semi-structured interviews. You could record, audio record, but not the informal interviews, because it's very awkward. But if you are really sitting with the informant and telling him about the objective of your study and asking him questions, even if it's unstructured or even if it's semi-structured, then you have to ask permission. So ask permission to record or even to take notes. No, you have to ask permission. So more so, I think earlier this morning, you had a session on visual anthropology, or I don't know if the session was visual anthropology or was it ethics. I'm not sure.
Visual anthropology, visual ethnography po.
Visual kanina. So the same thing with visual, di ba? You have to ask permission. You don't just take pictures or take videos. Even audio recording and taking notes, you have to ask permission from the informants. Okay. So I think the ethics part will be explained in another session. So we can just skip the details of that. Okay. And another thing, attitude. So in any qualitative research, the researcher is actually the primary research instrument. No, it's not your interview guide, it's not your observation guide, it's not whatever you have there, your guide questions. It's you. The researcher is the primary research instrument. That's why your attitude matters. No? Especially in doing ethnography in cultures that are different from your own. So your attitude should be unthreatening. You have to be self-controlled, supportive, polite, cordial. No? So even if you're finding what the person is sharing as weird or gross or whatever, you will not you will control yourself to not show what you really think, no? Because you're there to learn. Even if you think, uy, at the back of your mind, what's this practice? It's very unhealthy, it's unethical, it's you have this preconceived notions because you belong to a different culture. But you have to control that. You have to have self-control. And then you have to be polite and cordial. Even if you don't agree with what they're saying, you have to be still polite, cordial, no? And supportive and unthreatening. Because if you are going to a community or you're doing research and then you say, if you don't talk to me, then I'll tell you, I'll tell the barangay captain that you refuse to be interviewed. That's already threatening. So you won't get anything anymore because people will be talking to you out of fear, no? And that's not ideal. That's not uh, the way to go in doing ethnography. That's what we have emphasized a lot. You have to build rapport, and building rapport takes time, and building trust. When they trust you enough, they will show you what they are. They will tell you what they are. You will learn a lot if you know how to control, to be polite. Okay. And then another is at the same time that you are giving them room to define the content of the discussion, you should also keep in mind that your conversation should be focused on what you are there for. No? So what am I researching about? So I'm researching about this topic. And then in the course of the interview, he will tell you something about another topic, or maybe a personal something. And then you just keep on and on and on. And then when you review your notes, there's nothing there about your topic. So yeah, you also have to be focused. No? So aside from entertaining, self-control, because you're also a researcher, you also need to be focused while giving the informant room to define the content of the discussion. So you do not interrupt the informant also, because if the informant is talking lots and lots of things that are no longer related to what you're wanting to research about, you can do that politely. You do not say, don't tell me about those things because that's not part of my topic. No, you don't do that. You just find a way to segue or to go into another topic so that the off-topic conversation will be back in focus. So you have to also practice doing that, no? How to segue, or how to go into the topic that you would like without necessarily insulting or being unpolite, impolite, or things like that. Okay, so attitude is important. So before you go to the field, you have to have your own personal exercise also, so that you can go to the field without all this, like you're cramped with work, or you have a problem at home or whatever. You have to put that aside, because when you go to the field, it's another context, and you should not mix whatever problems you have outside with doing your research, because it might affect your attitude. Okay. So, how do you stimulate an informant to produce more information without injecting yourself so much into the interaction? Sometimes interviewers, or kind of people doing interviews, qualitative interviews, will say, "Oh, I only have this topic. So I'm just asking 2 or 3 questions. And then when I finish asking those questions, I'm done." But that's not the way to do quality research, right? Especially in ethnography. Even if you think that your 3 questions have already been answered, is it enough? Seldom is it enough. Seldom is those, like, for example, you want to know about how do you what type of food do you eat? And then they will tell you, "Oh, we eat this cassava." And then the cassava, our ancestors have already eaten cassava. And then we just followed eating cassava. And then that's it. And then you think, "Oh, I already got the answer. They eat cassava." But you have to have more information, because this is not just you're not just learning about what food. You have to probe. So cassava, you're thinking cassava, but you don't know how the cassava is prepared. So if you assume that they prepare the cassava the same way as we prepare cassava in our culture, that's an assumption. And then you will lack the information if you don't probe. So you have to probe. So you have to stimulate the informant to tell you more. No? So how will you do that? There are 5 general ways of probing. Number 1 is the silent probe. So you just keep quiet. Don't inject yourself into the conversation. So when the informant tells you, oh, we eat cassava 3 times a day, and we get the cassava from the market, and then we peel the cassava, and then we grate the cassava, and then we put it in a strainer and take out the liquid to get the toxic element from etc. So if the informant is talkative enough, then they will just go on and on. So you as researcher, you just keep quiet. So that is probe enough. So you're encouraging, you're being silent is encouraging them to continue. But if they already stop talking, so and then you still have more questions on the details, because earlier we said it's important to have details even in observation. So it's more important it's more important in interviewing that you get the details. So you get the details through probing. So if he already stops, if the informant already stops talking, then it's your task or your role as the researcher or the interviewer to stimulate them to give you more information. How do you do that? Aside from the silent probe, you can also use the echo probe. So echo probe, from the word itself, echo, is repeating the last thing the informant said and asking them to continue. So for example, we go back to the cassava example. Okay, we buy the cassava from the market, and then we process the cassava, and then we eat it. So you repeat the last thing that he said. You're telling me that you got the cassava from the market. Okay, so how did you get the cassava from the market? Of course, we bought it for this much pesos, and we have a vendor who is blah, blah, blah. And then he stops. And then you say, okay, so you have gotten the cassava from the market, and then you bought it from the vendor, and then you took it home, and you said you process the cassava. How do you process the cassava? So it's encouraging the informant to tell you more. So you should be a good listener, and you have to encourage them to continue. No? So if you don't do that, then of course your data will be only until there, and you will not get the details. Another way of probing is aha probe, meaning affirmative responses. So unlike the silent probe that you just keep silent, in the aha probe and in the echo probe that you repeat the last thing, in the aha probe, it's just giving an affirmative response, like nodding your head. No, it will tell him to continue, because if you nod your head, and then the person sees that you're nodding your head, they will be encouraged to talk more. Diba? If do you experienced that with a friend? For example, if you're talking with a friend, and then your friend nods or says, yes, so even doing those things, these are already stimulating your informant to go on, because it tells him that you are listening. So your way of listening to the informant will encourage him to go on in talking about these things. Okay. So these are very basic: the silent, the aha, and the echo. So what if he already tells you a lot of things, and then you still want to probe. We'll just skip this long question. We'll go straight to the probing by leading. This one. You base it on what the informant has been saying, and then you lead them to provide details on what he or she has been saying. So it's related to the echo probe, but here, like if he's telling you about, like, we go back to the example of plants that have medicinal values. So you probe by leading. So what about these plants? What part of the plant will you use? So anong parte ng tanim yung ginagamit for this ailment, etc. And then when he tells you those things, you can say, oh, are there other plants? Or how do you prepare if you use the leaves? How do you prepare this, or things like that? So you lead. You know where you're going because maybe you have a topic guide already, and so but you base it on what he has been saying. You don't just ask a question. You always base it on what the informant is telling you. Okay, this fourth one, the long question probe. So maybe you can think of questions that could generate more responses. Like for example, we did a study on young people's experiences of abortion. So that's a very sensitive topic. So the first question we asked, it's an example of a long question probe, which generates more responses, is we tell them, we ask them, please trace all your, please relate or narrate all your experiences about relationships ever since you started having relationships. So if the informant is already 31 years old, and then he or she starts telling you, when I was in grade 6, oh, I had my first crush. So you have, how old was a grade 6 student? Maybe 12. So from 12 to 31, you have a lot of stories about relationships. And even if you just keep silent, the person you're interviewing will go on and on from grade 6 to first year to high school to college to after college, etc., etc., etc. So you have to think also of such questions wherein you can generate more responses without injecting yourself too much into the conversation. So that is also, this also takes practice because most of us, we like to get the interview over with. I already got the responses I need. It's enough. But you don't know. There might be more details that you can get if you probe. So probing is para bang yung mga chismosa, di ba? Yun yung practice nila. Sabi, ay si Gerald at si Julia nakita doon sa sa beach resort, ganito, ganyan. Kung ikaw, you don't probe, okay. So nakita sila, okay. Pero yung chismosa sinasabi, anong ginagawa nila doon? Sinong nakakita? Saan specifically nakita? Mga ganon. So, yung mga chismosa, magaling mag-probe yan. So, dapat practicein din natin mga mga researchers para, pero mas may kabuluhan siguro yung inaano natin, pinoprobe natin, di ba? Kaysa mga chismis na mga buhay ng mga tao. So, na personal. So, parang mas broader yung pero ganun pa rin yun, di ba? Probing pa rin yun. Okay. So, yun. Ano ba? Before we go into rapid ethnographic assessment, maybe Marjorie? You have an activity, Marge?
Yes, Ma'am Ding.
Okay, sige. Ikaw muna, Marge.
Okay.
Stop
So,
muna ako, stop.
Okay. Let me just. So we'll be using the Jamboard again. This is in line with the activity, with the discussion of Ma'am Ding regarding asking probing questions or asking questions. You just need to write down one question that you'd like to ask an informant from an IP group in your area. So let me share to you the question on our chat box. So we'll be using Jamboard. Screen. Okay, just click the link. Just one question. So, click lang ulit yung sticky note na icon sa left side ng screen sa ilalim ng arrow. Okay, sige. Meron pa? So meron na tayong 8 or 9 na nag-participate. Meron pa po bang iba? Thank you. Okay. Alright, Ma'am Ding?
Ah,
Ako lang mag-share screen dito, Ma'am Ding. Ako
ay,
lang.
ako na lang. Ako na lang.
Sige, mag-stop sharing ako. Ano ba stop sharing? Kita sa stop option is okay there. Stop share. Sige, Ma'am Ding, ikaw lang mag-file.
Sorry ha, nakita kanina kumakain ako ng saging. Nag-snack muna ako sandali. Sige. So, ano sa dumarami ba kayo? What preparations? Okay, may iba pa ba? May iba pang answers sa ano? Okay, so ito na lang siguro. Wait, sige. So I moved around the responses no from you about meron pa pala. Ano pinakamasayan? Sige, meron pa ba? Sige. So I again segregated the cards, the sticky notes based on the questions that were written, no? So on this side we have questions. Ay, meron pa. Saan po kayo galing? And on the other side, I also have questions. Questions. Tapos on the other side, we also have questions. Question is, if we have questions on this side and questions on the other side, the question is, what are the answers to these questions? Sige, ito. May na-COVID na po ba sa inyo? Anong answer? Anong possible answer? Anyone? May
Wala pa po.
sa inyo? Ay, wala pa po. Ay, meron na po. Ito. Alam po ba ninyo ang COVID? Ano yung possible answer?
Hindi po.
Opo.
Hindi po.
Opo.
Okay. Ito, are you happy in your tribe?
Opo.
Opo. Oh, hindi. Or
Medyo po.
dumarami. Oo. Dumarami po ba kayo o umuunti?
Dumarami po.
Sapat lang po.
Pero pwede pong umuunti po. Ganon. So these questions have parang possible na answers. Na, paano ba to paano to i-edit, Marge? Edit. Dara. Okay. So these questions are called close-ended questions, di ba? So
Yes.
these three are answerable by yes or no, no? So if you ask these questions, then you expect either a yes or a no.
Yeah.
So anong data makuha mo dun?
Wala.
Walang details. So itong question na to, it seems like not a close-ended question, but actually it is because it's a multiple choice question. You either answer dumarami or umuunti, di ba? Hindi siya yes or no, pero it's answerable by the choices that you already gave them. So parang close-ended na rin yun. So ito, linagay ko ito sa gitna kasi parang meron siyang question na close-ended, meron din siyang open-ended. So yung close-ended niya is itong may mga halamang gamot ba po ba kayo? Oo, meron. Ito, close-ended din to, di ba? Pero yung paano kayo nabubuhay rito, dito yon sa kabila. Anong question to? Anong anong type anong type of question yung sa kabila? Kung close-ended yung sa kabila ano?
Open-ended.
Anong opposite ng close-ended? Open-ended. So ano yung open-ended question? Yung open-ended question ay answerable by iba-iba. So depende sa kanila. So paano nyo mailarawan ang buhay nyo ngayong may pandemya? So how do you describe? So describing is kung itong informant na to yung tinatanong mo, iba yung description niya, ibang informant, iba din yung description niya. Hindi siya nagsasabi na oo, hindi, 'di ba? Mas siya, mas marami kang data makukuha kasi quality yung research mo. Ano yung description nila ng buhay nila na may pandemya. Tapos ito, paano kayo nagpapaanak, 'di ba? Pero meron tayong sandali ha. Sige, yun lang muna. Paano nagpapaanak? How did you come to this place? Paano kayo nakarating dito upang mamuhay? How many years have you been staying here? Okay. Describe your typical day in this area. What can you say about your culture? Saan kayo galing o nagmula? Ano ang pinakamasayang araw nyo? What preparations did you make during this pandemic? Ano ang nag-udyok sa inyo na manatili mabuhay sa lugar nito? So as opposed to the close-ended, iba-iba ang pwedeng maging answer, di ba? Iba-iba ang pwedeng maging response ng yung mga informants. So we should practice asking more open-ended questions rather than close-ended questions. So how do we turn close-ended questions into open-ended questions? So example ito, may na-COVID na po ba sa inyo? How do you turn that into an open-ended question? Pwede namang hindi yes or no, di ba? Paano yun? Anyone? Wala. May na-COVID na po ba sa inyo? Pwede niyong itanong, anong experience ng community or ng mga tao during the pandemic? Yung mailara ito, di ba? So, pwede mong i-probe yun na may mga sino-sino po ang nagka-COVID na dito sa inyo. Marami-rami na ilang tao na ba yung nagka-COVID? Parang gano'n, di ba? You can turn the close-ended question into an open-ended question. So are you happy in your tribe? So you can turn this into an open question. What do you feel when you are with your tribe or in living in this tribe or whatever? So you can make the close-ended into an open-ended question para mas marami kang makukuhang information from your informants rather than just them telling you whether it's a yes or a no or a multiple choice. Pero meron akong comment na iba. Merong open-ended nga pero parang may ano yun? Parang may medyo assumption yung paano po kayo nagpapaanak dito yung kung walang kumadrona o hospital. Pwede namang tanggalin yun, di ba? Paano po kayo nagpapaanak dito? Kasi yung sinasabi mo kung walang kumadrona o hospital, it's already from your culture, di ba? So in our culture, sa ospital talaga tayo nanganganak, merong midwife, ganun. So we are already assuming. So pwede namang i-take out ito, di ba? Paano po kayo nagpapaanak dito? Yun lang. Wala kang ini-inject na from your culture. Tapos ito rin, yung, saan ba yun? Ito. Paano po kayo nabubuhay rito? Meron. Kung walang gamot o medisina. Di ba? So again, this is from parang your culture, merong gamot, merong medisina. So, nabubuhay talaga tayo kasi may gamot at medisina. Pero, pwede namang itanong mo na lang na, paano po kayo nabubuhay rito? Yun lang. Wala nang kung ito, paano kayo nagpapanak. Wala nang parang assumption na dapat may ganito kayo, wala. So, ano kayo nabubuhay? Di ba? So, when we formulate our questions for our researches, we should be mindful na parang we should be mindful na we are there to learn from them. So, dapat open-ended, hindi close-ended. Tapos, we are there to ask about their culture, their experiences, and not their culture when they're not the same as us. Parang, di ba? Tanggalin natin yung mga presumptions natin na doon sa question. So, pwedeng mas mas maging open sila kasi hindi mo ini-inject yung sayo. Parang mas open kang makinig sa kanila. Parang ganun. So, again, just like doing observations, just like writing thick descriptions, also asking questions is very important for a researcher doing ethnographic research in communities or in other field settings. Okay, yun lang siguro. So, Marge, balik tayo.
Ma'am Ding, may nag-share sa comment section.
Ay, meron?
Chat.
Okay.
Box.
Ching. Yes or no? Dapat po siguro may follow-up questions sa answerable. Yes or no question. Oo, yun. Pero yung follow-up question kasi, yun, pwede yun sa probing. Pero yung question mo talaga at first should not be close-ended. Parang mas okay kung open-ended yung una mo tapos yung follow-up open-ended pa rin. Para mas marami kang makukuha na mga data or information sa kanila. Okay. Sige. So, asa na kita, March?
Okay na, Ma'am Ding, wrap.
So, we are now, wait.
For rapid ethnographic assessment. Brief discussion on this.
Sige. Wait. Okay. Okay, let me just share my screen again. Okay. So actually, itong rapid ethnographic assessment, parang na-add lang to sa topic namin. Yung main topic namin talaga is yung key informant interview tsaka yung participant observation. Pero na-add lang to kasi merong times na we would like to do ethnographic research pero parang nagmamadali tayo. So merong application of ethnographic methods in action research. Di ba yung action research, yun, parang we need fast na mga information, na mga data. So, paano ginagamit yung ethnographic methods when you are doing action research? So, isa na yung rapid ethnographic assessment. So, yung rapid ethnographic assessment, qualitative research method siya, pero yung focus niya is on the collection and analysis of locally relevant data. So it's used usually for exploratory or formative research, for program assessment, needs assessment, program evaluation, yung nandun sa community. So you're using ethnographic methods, pero hindi yung ethnography per se na you spend a lot of time in the community. Parang you use the methods, but you are using these methods for specific purposes only, like an assessment of a program, and an assessment of needs, or an evaluation of a program. Okay, so the methods utilized are the same actually in for what we have been discussing. We have the observations, we have the interviews, and other methods like focus groups, mapping, short surveys. You can do that, but we will not go into that anymore. We are just emphasizing that ethnographic methods can also be used in action research. So rapid ethnographic assessment draws on the principles of ethnography to learn about the social and cultural conditions of individuals and communities. Okay, so when is a rapid ethnographic assessment useful? So when we need more information about a problem. So for example, may problem, baha sa Metro Manila, or logging, merong logging or mining sa mga bundok-bundok. So we need information about the problem. So we go to the communities, we look for informants. So parang parang fast track mo yung ethnography, no? Kasi may problem kang gustong malaman in more detail. So like when the problem is emerging or evolving, you can use ethnographic methods in learning about the problem and looking for and learning about what are the effects of such a problem, especially on the community. So especially if we are dealing with vulnerable populations, no? So like the IPs, for example, and then we need to plan or adjust a program or policy. And lastly, when we need to involve the community. So a rapid ethnographic assessment is actually applied already, no? So action research, and then you apply ethnographic methods that we have been telling you about observation, about key informant interviews, and even the visual anthropology that was explained this morning by Myung and kalimot ko sa okay, Danny, I think. Okay, so this is just an example that all these methods that we're teaching you about ethnography can be useful even for policy, for programs, for projects that are involving communities. So you can go there, do a needs assessment using key informant interview and observation. So in summary, just summarize, we have been talking about two basic methods that are used in ethnography: participant observation and key informant interviews. And such methods can be utilized both in basic research as well as in applied research. So just like the rapid ethnographic assessment. So there are also other ethnographic methods that we have not discussed here. So I think maybe there are some other schedules that will be discussing other ethnographic methods. But basically, these two methods are very they are parang the foundation of the methods that are being used in ethnography. So if you know how to observe, if you know how to identify and ask key informants, then you have very rich data already to begin with. Okay, so how do you document all these things that you have learned from the field? So basically, you have field notes. So this is very important. That's what I have said earlier. You take note of your observations, you take note of the conversations that you had informally with people in the field. So keeping field notes is very important. So you can just have a small notebook with you in the field. I don't know, with the young generation, they prefer a cell phone because it has a notepad and things like that. But for the older generation who like to write, using the pen and the paper, you can have a small notebook with you that's very handy so that all these observations can be written down in this notebook. And then when you go home or when you are out of the field, you go to a larger notebook and you put in more details there in the larger notebook. So the observations, the ideas, the reflections while you are doing your research. So field notes are very important. And then for transcriptions, these are part of your field notes, but it's more on the interviews. You transcribe the interviews, the questions, the responses, the interactions with your informants. And then this was for this morning, photos, videos, audio recordings. Audio recordings of interviews could be very helpful in transcribing. And then photos and videos could be very helpful in participant observation. But of course, we should follow the protocols, no, the ethics of doing these things. But for documentation purposes, these are the very important things that you should have. Your field notes, your transcriptions, and then your audio recordings for your interviews and your photo or video for your observations to supplement what you have in your notes. So to summarize about the characteristics of a good ethnographic researcher, in Cebuano, we have a shortcut for this, no? But it might not be understood because we are in Camarines Norte. So I just took it out, the Cebuano version. So we as ethnographic researchers, we should be observant, no? Observant. We should know to observe what's happening around us. So it's a skill, actually. It's a skill. Because some people are not observant enough and they don't know what's happening. But there are others who are very observant that even if they're talking to a person, they know what's happening at the side, they know what's happening at the back because of their being observant. And then, aside from that, you have to be conversant. So conversant is talking to people. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to, it's another skill actually, because there are some people who go to the field and they don't talk to anyone there, or they only talk to their colleagues. But you should know how to talk to different types of people, and you have to adjust to these types of people, no? So you're conversant. And lastly, you should be inquisitive. So inquisitive is asking asking more details. So from your observations, if you are inquisitive, you ask, oh, what is he using? What is he doing? What's the meaning of that? Etc. That's being inquisitive. If you are talking to people and then they tell you something that you don't understand, you don't just nod your head, you ask. So that's being inquisitive. So it's very important for an ethnographic researcher to have these skills, no? And we have to hone these skills that we could observe better, we could converse, and we ask questions better. And aside from that, we should be good listeners, because if you are in the field and you want to learn from the people, you should listen to what they're saying and be open-minded. So you don't judge what they're doing or what they're telling you, but keep an open mind. And then, of course, in line with ethics, you have to be honest and maintain your integrity. So you don't manufacture data, you don't manufacture observations or transcriptions. So you should be honest and have integrity. Okay. So I will not go into the ethical considerations because there's another topic for that. Okay. So I think that's it for this afternoon. So maybe we can already open the floor to questions regarding
Isa pa yan, yung resignation ko, Jo, hindi tinatanggap ni Rosa din.
March.
Ma'am,
Questions nila. Oh,
you have questions or clarifications? Parang wala na, Ma'am Ding. Walang questions.
So anyone po who has a question or clarification to our speakers may just type in the chat box their question.
Another technique siguro yung semi-structured lang. You can begin by an opening statement saying, and this is what I did in among the migrants of Malaysia. Ang opening statement ko lang sa interview, tell me your story of migration. Ano po yung istorya ng pag-migrate ninyo? Dito sa New Zealand o dito sa Singapore o dito sa Malaysia. And you got very, very interesting responses kasi kung minsan sila yung nagbibigay ng timeline. I remember one interview sa Singapore. Ay, matagal na po ako dito sa Singapore. Mga 3 buwan lang po after yung pagbitay kay floor contemplation. Can you imagine they give you the timeline kung kailan siya nag-migrate at anong istorya. And then you get interesting and then you probe, hindi po kayo natakot nung alam niyo naman na may nangyaring ganon, paano kayo nagdesisyon tumuloy, di ba? Pero ikuntahan na talaga naging, and then you deepen the conversation. I think it's very, very important to empower the people we are interviewing to tell their stories. Okay, so kaya nga, di ba, his story daw, history. Yung, especially sa akin, yung mga kawakaramahan ng mga na-interview ko pa na yung babae. So, her story naman yung yung style nun. Sige po, isa-isa ninyo. Paano po kayo nakarating dito sa New Zealand? One person I interviewed sa New Zealand had a very, very interesting story kasi she met her husband sa Singapore. Nang domestic worker siya. At yung husband niya was the brother of her boss. Nag-meet sila doon, di ba? Tapos nakarating siya sa New Zealand. Di ba? Napakagandang mga yung mga migrants natin, kumisan, multi-location, di ba? Yung from one place they go to another place. And mainly because of their occupation. Yun lang po, I learned a lot in my fieldwork. And I hope dito sa CNSC, matututo tayo ng sabay-sabay naman sa ating paggawa ng ating fieldwork. Hopefully, matapos na itong pandemya na ito at na makalabas tayo, ganadong-ganado na akong lumabas at nagbo-volunteer na nga ako pumunta sa Palawan with kay Doc Ami Rara naghahanap siya ng kung sabi ko, volunteer na ako, Ma'am Ami. Sige, maraming salamat po. Marge and Zona, sila po yung mga veterano nating mga anthropologists sa University of San Carlos. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Jo.
thank you. Yun. Isang
Thank you very
question
much.
lang, marami ka na makukuha, di ba? Basta yung question mo, well thought of na talagang it could get a lot of possible responses from your informants and it's their story. It's their narratives. Importante yun. any more no, sharing or clarification or before we end? Ay, ano ba, mag-end na tayo. Anong time ba tayo? Until what time ba? Or time na ba? Sa ni Marge, sa background niya, ano pa?
Good
May iba
afternoon
pa.
po.
Sige.
Nakasabot man po akong Bisaya.
Ah,
Ngayong hapon sa tanan. I would like to share my experience in Palawan, in a tribe, in Batak tribe po in particular. Sa Northern Palawan ito sa Rojas. So, doon po yung pagpasok sa community. Halimbawang hindi marunong yung mga tao na makaintindi ng Tagalog. For example, for us na galing sa Luzon, going to Visayas, Mindanao, na hindi nakakaintindi halimbawa ng Bisaya, mga ganun po. Halo na kasi doon. Parang may Muslim areas na rin sila. So yung assimilation ng languages nila ng Ilonggo, Tagbanwa, Batak, mga ganyan po. So makakatulong po ba sa amin if ever na merong from the community, for example, na interpreter or marunong ng salita nila na doon sa pagtatanong namin, for example, na mag-i-interview na, okay lang po ba yun na from their community or may bias, for example, kung manggagaling sa kanila, or kailangan namin from the outside din na nakakaintindi ng lingwahe nila? For example, in my case, may missionary na kasama ako na nakakaintindi ng lingwahe nila. But then, nagkaroon siya ng emergency that time, so naiwan ako sa community at tumira ako doon for 2 weeks. At inaral ko yung lingwahe din muna nila at nakatulong sa akin yung mga bata na marunong ng Tagalog at nakakaintindi unti-unti ng lingwahe nila dun sa pag-interview dun sa mga matatanda. So in our case, for example dito, halimbawa IPs ang pupuntahan po namin at may mga matatandang hindi talaga makapag-Tagalog, yun po yung isang magiging hindi naman problema, but then challenge for us na intindihin yung salita na minsan ay magkahalo yung pag nila sagot sa ating mga tanong.
Thank you, Sir Irvin, for sharing.
siguro yung sige, Marge.
Ano lang, tama naman. Tama yung pag may mga local na pwede mong gawing guide or parang mo rin. Sila yung magka-translate ng mga, so much better actually kung local nga. Sa akin, much better kung local. Kasi mas makakatulong yun sa'yo para pag mas alam nila yung sitwasyon sa loob. Saka mas alam nila kung sinong pupuntahan at saka kung paano sinasabi yung anong mga ibig sabihin ng mga sinasabi nila in their own context, gano'n. So mas favorable, mas advantage kung from local sa community yung kasama mo nag-interpret ng mga sinasabi ng mga informants mo.
Thank you po.
Kasi siguro yung yung local, mayroon kang parang guide or parang interpreter na local, pero you also have to be yung sinasabi mo na parang bias, ganun. Meron kaming experience yan na yung local na parang younger, tapos may tendency siya na kahit hindi na sinabi nung matanda niya ganito, ganyan.
Nadadagdagan, ma'am.
Pero,
Opo.
pero ikaw siguro as researcher, parang pwede mong i-clarify sa kanya, yun ba yung sabi ng matanda?
So, filter.
Sinasabi din naman nila na, yung first part, yun yung sabi ng matanda. Tapos yung part, akin na yun. So, at least, sinasabi niya. Pero, kasi local na, so data pa rin yun na in sa kanyang perspective. Pero you also have to know na ito yung sabi ng matanda, ito yung sa kanya as siya na local.
Hindi talaga pwedeng makapture lahat, Mr. Irvin. Hindi mo pwedeng makapture lahat sa translation yung nangyayari. And you have to accept the fact na pag hindi mo alam yung language, hindi makakapture. Hindi mo makapture lahat. Kaya nga, you better watch yung Lost in Translation. It was really funny, no? Kaya sabi ko, ganyan ang experience ng mga anthropologists yung movie, no? Ng Lost in Translation. May nakakatawa kasi akong experience niyan sa Davao. Kaya ako, I lived in Davao for about 6 months. So, makasulti gamay, makahibalo gamay, pero hindi talaga fluent. Naintindihan ko in general, naintindihan ko yung conversation. Pero hindi talaga makapalalim, no? I remember coming home victoriously after 1 month in one community and telling my people sa community development and training kasi ito, hoy, marunong na akong Cebuano, mag-Bisayan. Tapos sabi nila, sample naman ako. Tapos tawanan sila. Kasi panay Cebuano yung kausap ko, Cebuano speaking. And sabi nila, Jo, hindi yan Cebuano, Ilonggo yan. Kasi yung natiraan ko pala.
Pag-mix na maayo man.
Of the Ilonggos. Kasi maraming Cebuano speaking. Pero yung bahay na natirahan ko ay Ilonggo. Kaya ang na-pick up ko yung Ilonggo, rather than the Cebuano. But that is really funny because yun nga, pag wala ka talagang alam, mabilis kang maloko. Ibig sabihin, madali kang ma-mislead ng environment mo. Kaya importante talaga na may basic knowledge ka din ng language, which I did not have at that time. I did not have it.
Importante yun, yung language. Kasi barrier talaga yung language kung ano.
Okay po. Daghang salamat.
Okay, any more? Questions or experiences, clarifications before we end?
Advantage, Dr. Zona is one of the most respected anthropologists sa Pilipinas. Kaya samantalang message niya sa atin. Yan? Kita mo siya yung nag-train kay Miyong Turing, di ba? Kaya galing ng mga estudyante niya. kaya tanong na kayo, ito na yung pagkakataon nyo. This is the time for you to ask the best of the best anthropologists in the Philippines. Sila yung nagbibigay sa atin ng input na yan.
I am excited to do ethnography na po. with the speakers ngayon, we are inspired to go back, halimbawa dun sa aming previous works and BS to continue our knowledge and learnings. So with this information na binigay niyo po sa amin, maraming salamat po at alam naming makakatulong ito sa amin. Daghang salamat po.
Okay, I guess we could already wrap up now. We have a last parang exercise. hindi naman grabe exercise. May last question. Kasi wala kayong question, so kami magka-question. Dali.
Yan kayo, may test ngayon ang ating professor.
Sandali. Nawala yung share. Okay, saan ba yun? Share screen. Nawala. Marge, tabang Marge.
Entire screen, Ma'am Ding, na. Kasi mo ikuan dira.
Ha?
And slide man ay mo hawas. And slide ay mong nakuan. Nagkuan ka. Slideshow man ay mong share.
Slideshow?
Oo. Entire screen na lang siguro.
Kasi nag-switch yata si ma'am.
Entire screen, Marge?
Entire screen na lang, Ma'am Ding.
Hindi ito, entire screen.
Murag dili. Murag slide na lang.
No, mood show.
End of slideshow na. Exit daw na. I-click, i-close ang imuhang slideshow, Ma'am Ding. Kaya i-close. Ay. Wala dyan.
Wait. Ayun, wala. Ay. Share. Good siya. New share. New share.
Exit daw.
Exit.
Ay mawala sad.
Ikaw ko na day.
Usang i-share akong ding. Ang kuan.
Itong minti. Ibutang na lang ako sa chat box.
Oh,
I just put it in the chat box. Wait.
sige.
Kabaw na ko day. End of slideshow. Wala din ako na end ang slideshow. I'll just write the link. I'll just put the link in the chat box and then please write whatever is asked. Last na. Promise, last na to. Sige. Yun. Nasa chat box. Okay. So important learnings which you gained from this session. No, kahit one word, two words, one phrase. Yun lang. So we have 28 participants minus the facilitators, organizers, the technical, parang may 20 siguro, no? So we only have 3 answers. We're waiting for the others. Maybe just one word or one phrase. Ah, 7 na. So we lack 13 more.
Well, maon lang siguro na akong ding.
Okay, so maybe the others are shy to type or or they think that what they have learned are already here. So let me just check. Qualitative and ethnographic research is never simple. So hindi quali na lang para madali. No? So hindi siya simple. Tapos exciting daw siya, exciting. So, yun, yung general about qualitative research. Tapos, may mga specifics dito on types of questions. Types of questions for key informant interviews, asking open-ended questions, same thing, asking open-ended questions. Tapos, learn to ano to? Construct questions that ano to? Learn to parang i-reconstruct yung question na answerable by yes or no. Tapos, how to expound questions to key informants. Tapos, sorry, Marge. I gain more on how to conduct an interview. Tapos, meron ba how to describe observations objectively. Avoid sweeping adjectives when describing. How to, yun na siguro. Meron pa ba?
Ano, sa chat, Ma'am Ding.
Meron sa chat. Sa chat, this will be good for a training manual in field ethnography. Sige. Kailan? Okay. Sige, we have to be careful in creating di ko kita lagi aning ubos di siya manaog. Okay. We have to be careful in creating questions that may be open-ended. Moreover, the different reminders in doing key informant and participant observation. And a lot, especially on methodologies, doing actual interviews. Okay. So thank you. I think we are glad that you gained something from this session. We are also glad to be invited to this important activity in your university. And we'd like to thank Dr. Joe for inviting us to share what we know and what we have experienced in doing ethnographic research. It's a good activity for exchanging. Maybe in the future, we could also invite some of you to talk to our faculty also in our university. Thank you.
The pleasure is ours, Doc Zona.
We'll turn you over back to the CNSC organizers.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Joe.
Thank you very much po to our resource speakers for this afternoon, Ma'am Marge and Ma'am Zona Asper. So we will now proceed with the awarding of the Certificate of Commendation. Camarines Norte State College awards this Certificate of Commendation to Zona H. Ampere in grateful recognition of her distinguished and invaluable service rendered as resource person during the Doing Ethnography Seminar Workshop held on July 29, 2021, thereby contributing immeasurably to the prestige and success of the event. Given this 29th day of July 2021 via Zoom platform. Signed, Marlo M. De La Cruz, PhD, CNSC President. Same certificate of commendation is also given to Ma'am Marjury E. Dino in grateful recognition of her distinguished and invaluable service rendered as resource person during the Doing Ethnography Seminar Workshop held on July 29, 2021, thereby contributing immeasurably to the prestige and success of the event. Given this 29th day of July 2021 via Zoom platform, signed by Dr. Marlo M. De La Cruz, CNSC President. So thank you once again po to our resource speakers and to our participants. Maraming salamat din po sa inyong active participation at sa inyong willingness to listen and learn from our resource persons. So before we end, let us again have a photo documentation. We want to invite all participants to please turn on your video. Okay, so are we ready for, let's give our warm smile, our sweet smile for our photo documentation for this afternoon. Congratulations for finishing the entire session for the third day of this webinar workshop.
Thank you again, Marge.
Thank you very much po.
Maraming salamat.
Bye-bye.
Meron po
Bye.
bukas.
Thank you.
Ang patanong po, meron po bukas.
Sige, pag-start ka muna yung video kasi di ba